All right, you've been given the reins. All right, thank you. Yeah, thank you everyone for coming. First of all, this is kind of exciting. This is the first workshop we're doing where we have people all in a room, and then we have a bunch of people remote, which is pretty cool. Proud to say that we have partners and development teams all over Canada and the US joining us today, so that's pretty cool. For those of you who don't know me, my name is James Vidler. I've been with Agility now for about 6 years, and I was formerly the head of the professional services division here. So again, for those of you who don't know, Agility, we used to have, we have a product, which is the CMS, and we also had a services arm where we were actually building websites using our own platform. But that has totally changed now. We are solely 100% a product company, and I've loved using Agility for many years. I was the head of that services team, so managing a team of developers and project managers using the platform. And I'm really excited to be able to share some of that knowledge with you guys and really sort of tell the world about how good Agility I think it is in terms of a development platform, in terms of how easy it is and how flexible it is. So hopefully today I can share some of those things and really empower you guys to, imagine how you can build solutions using Agility. So this particular workshop is tailored around people that really haven't either just haven't seen a glimpse of Agility, or completely brand new to Agility, or they've used Agility in the past but they want a refresher on things. So we'll be sticking to a lot of basic core concepts throughout this entire workshop. And the way I'm going to break this down is we're going to go through sort of an overview of what Agility is, what the architecture is like, how it works, and then we're going to dive into actually everyone running their own sandbox locally, and we'll actually be doing some coding along with me. So you'll be following along as I go, and hopefully if all goes well by the end of this workshop, we'll have built something and actually have that deployed in the cloud, and we'll sort of take everything from getting to know Agility to building something simple and actually deploying that, so you can get an idea of how it works. And then obviously throughout the whole presentation, there's about 10 of us here, and I think there's another 14 people online. If anyone has any questions during any time, please don't hesitate to let me know. For those of you that are here remotely, you can just either raise your hand or just unmute yourself and just start talking, and I'll stop and answer your question. And then we've also got a few helpers here as well, guys. So if you're stuck on something or have any quick questions, I have Charlie and Tooch here as well. Charlie is our supporting QA analyst, and Tooch is our lead product engineer. So if you have any questions, feedbacks, or concerns about the product, or you just want to get to know one of the guys who's built a bunch of stuff, Tooch is right there, hiding behind that column. But before I really get into this, I want to know a little bit about you guys. Some of you already know, some of you I don't know. So I just want to take a quick few minutes here to introduce yourselves. And I want you to introduce yourself, tell me what your name is, what company you're from, and any what I call burning questions you have. So if you've come here with a specific question in your head and you want to find an answer to, I may not be able to get to it within the presentation, but I've dedicated some time towards the end to be able to go through and answer all those questions. So, I'll start just as an example. My name is, again, James Vidler. I work at Agility. And, my burning question is, did you guys come here to learn about Agility, or did you come for, the free coffee and beer? So Harpreet, why don't you start? We'll start with the in-room participants.
Yeah. Okay. So hi, my name is Harpreet. I work at Point Alliance as a .NET developer. I've been working with Agility for the past couple of years. I want to learn about using Agility with React.
React. Okay. Cool. You can definitely talk about that after. We won't cover it in this session, but we can talk about it for sure. So let me add that to the list here. So React. Great question.
My name is Faith from Sandbox. I'm the manager. And basically my team is relatively new. So for myself, I don't know about Agility.
if you had to pick one specific question, would it be that you just want to sort of understand the general concepts of agility, or it's like specifically React?
Actually, yeah. Maybe the same.
Yeah, okay, cool. All right, so maybe React times Deuce. So we'll spend some extra time at the end of the session then to talk about that a bit, because we actually had a workshop on that last month, which we had a few people come out to, and so I'm happy to share some of that knowledge from that workshop too.
Hi, my name is Abhishek. I work at Point Alliance. I'm pretty new in CMS, and this is my first time I'm just going to the Agility. So I want to learn something like from the scratch.
Yep.
And once I get it, then I will move on. Yeah.
Perfect. All right. So okay, we'll do React maybe times 3 or plus 1, but also just general.
Yeah.
My name is Rashmi and I am .NET developer at Point Alliance, and I'm very beginner to Agility, so my main focus is to learn general development of Agility.
Okay, cool. Is there any one question you have in particular in how things work that you want to be able to have answered, or you just want to sort of see how things work?
I just want to focus on the backend side.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Hi, my name is Ahmed. I work at Agility. Here to learn more about, I haven't used Agility in the past. To see how it integrates, how extensible it is.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So if you had one question, would it be something along the lines of like, what is the architecture like, or something like that? Or yeah. All right. Cool.
So I'll make sure that we focus on that.
My name is Craig. I also work at Nginx. I'm a .NET developer and work with SiteAffinity, work with other CMSs. So I guess I'm here to see what Agility is and how it's different.
How we stack up?
Yeah. I'm also curious about this free beer.
Yeah. So yeah, good point. Free beer. Sorry, remote people. I mean, feel free to crack a beer when you're at home or wherever you are. But yeah, there is free beer here. So maybe in like in about an hour or so, we'll take a break and yeah, help yourselves. It's Friday afternoon after all, so.
Have some beer.
You have beer?
You told me.
Oh yeah, no, yeah. I was saying we have beer there. I thought you said that you also have beer. I was like, oh, that's cool. I told people to come prepared, but that's pretty good. All right. So for you remote folks, hopefully you guys are listening right now. I'd like you guys to introduce yourselves as well. Russ, did you want to start?
Sure. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, except I lost you on the TV somehow. Okay, yeah. Go ahead.
All right. I'm Russ. I'm the CTO of Affinity in the UK. I'm here because we just picked up some Agility projects and just looking for a refresher. I used to work for Agility. Actually, very last time I did it, it was a hire on James Vidler. Very proud moment. But yeah, I'm just here to refresh my mind.
Oh, that's awesome. Sorry, I lost the audio here on the big screen, so I don't know if you guys in here heard what he said, but Russ actually used to work for Agility back in the day, and he was
Back
actually...
UK. Wasn't that long ago?
Well, it's 6 years ago now. It's yeah, it seems like a long time. Yeah, he was a major part of the reason why I came to work for Agility, actually. He trained me, and now he's attending a training session where hopefully he can learn something from me. So it's pretty cool how that works. He's a really great guy, too. I'm happy to have him.
Thanks, man.
Thank you. Matt, do you want to go next?
Sure. I'm a technical project manager in Denver, and I work for Ninth Wonder, and I'm here with a couple other people, but just trying to get an overview of CMS and see how it works.
All right, great. Matt, the other people that are with you, do they want to introduce themselves as well? Or, I mean, they can remain silent participants, but I'll leave that up to them.
Oh, we can say hi. This is Jeff Robertson. We're all in different rooms, so I could probably hit Matt with something if I can curve it around the wall, but yeah, I also work with Ninth Wonder, and I'm mostly interested in deployment, and I've learned that there are different options for deployment and the architecture of how you Agility hosted or hosting yourself on Azure, and a couple different ways to build that out. So interested in seeing what all those are and how you pros and cons of each.
Cool. Awesome.
And this is Katie, who's also part of Ninth Wonder. I could also throw something and hit someone if I needed to, but I am a front-end developer, but I just recently did my first .NET CMS website, so I'm just looking to see how we can use this with our clients in the future, and just how you would develop it in general.
And I'm assuming you want to see too, like you want to be able to envision how you as a front-end developer could work within this sort of site as well, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, great.
That's all of us.
Anyone? Yeah, that's all you guys from Ninth Wonder?
Yep.
Andrew, would you like to go next?
Sure. My name's Andrew. I'm a developer at Falcon Software. We did a training little demo with you earlier in the year sometime. Just kind of looking at refresher kind of.
Perfect. Well, welcome. So you're just looking for refresher. That's cool. Any burning questions for you, Andrew?
No, not really.
Okay, great. And we have a user here, Jay Simons. I'm sorry, I don't remember your first name.
It's all good. Can you hear me at all? I can't even tell.
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Perfect. So I'm Jackson. I'm a web developer front end at Heaving. We're based out of Madison, Wisconsin. And one of our clients uses Agility. I have yet to actually work with that client, but I know with workload coming in kind of hard recently, gonna have to get familiar with it. So that's just the general state I'm in. I'm also gonna have some people coming in. They're gonna be looking around, just sort of here to see how it all works, but not really as hands-on as I'm gonna be.
Awesome. Sounds great, man. And yeah, I think I know exactly which customer you're talking about, so we can touch base on that later.
Cool.
Fernando.
Yes.
Yeah. Why don't you take a moment to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Fernando. I'm a software .NET developer. I'm Falcon Software, and I'm here just to know more about Agility. So I hope you enjoy.
Okay. And then we've got actually a few other Agility folks on here. Sufyan, are you there? You want to introduce yourself? Nope, he's not there. That's fine. User Mirko, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, of course. Hi, my name is Mirko Freund. I'm IT director at Falcon Software here in beautiful Victoria in British Columbia.
Oh, I'm jealous.
And my key question here, I mean, the whole point why I'm attending here is to get a sense of how it feels developing with Agility and how efficient it is. And the burning question I would have is, how can we support a typical multi-environment, enterprise-level environment with Agility? So where we have a development environment, an offering environment, and last but not least, the live environment, and how do we push from one environment to the next?
Great question. I will definitely get to that.
Excellent.
I think we have... Is there anyone else that I missed here? I saw Katie here. Did Katie already go?
No, Katie's part of Ninth Wonder Denver office.
All right. So I think we're good here. Good to get going. Thanks, everyone. Did I miss anybody else? All right. I think we're good. So yeah, my role here at Agility is, used to be building websites, now my role here is supporting you guys building websites, apps, and all these cool things using Agility. So think of me as a resource to get information. So, ask me about anything development related, architecture, training, documentation. If you have any ideas for feature requests, any things you think we can do better. If you have any questions about cloud, I know a lot about that too over the years. So use me as a free resource because my goal is to help you guys and make you guys successful. You can contact me through email, Facebook, or LinkedIn, or give me a shout. Always happy to meet up with people in person. So a couple of tips for this workshop is I would recommend opening up a copy of this presentation on your own laptop so you can sort of follow along. This slide can be a little confusing to navigate, but once you understand how it works, it's pretty easy. You'll see here in the bottom right-hand corner, you have these two buttons, these like triangle buttons. Also, you move the sides left and right, and you can use the keyboard as well. But you'll notice that actually when you navigate to different sections here, you'll be able to actually scroll up and down into different sections. So you're sort of diving into things there. I just wanted to highlight that because the last time I did that, people were a little confused about how that worked. So to take a moment here, if you haven't opened this already, open it up. I made a bit.ly link here just to make it quick and easy to be able to look at and type in and open up yourself. So take a moment to do that before I move on to the next slide.
How is that?
Just type in this in a browser and it'll take you here. So just type in that bit.ly/agldev1218 and that'll open up this slide so you can follow along. Everything that I'm doing in this workshop, you can follow along as I'm doing it, but there's also written instructions on exactly what to do. So, if you get stuck or caught behind and we're taking a break, you want to catch up, you can sort of use those to self-help yourself to be able to catch back up. Or if you want to refer to this later on, or you just not feeling it today and it's a Friday and you'd rather just sit and listen, you can do that too and work on this on your own time. So I'll wait just another moment and then I'll move to the next slide. Okay. So the agenda, what we're going to do here, I already talked about this a little bit, but I'm going to go through an overview of Agility. We're going to actually build a blog, which sort of covers a lot of different concepts in Agility and is a good way to sort of get your feet wet. And then we'll actually deploy that to your servers. So each one of you guys has an Agility Sandbox instance, which is in the cloud. You also have a deployed web server, which is also in Azure. And you have a code base, which you'll be able to run locally. And we'll cover that momentarily. So the first thing I want to get started with is talk a little bit about the Agility architecture. It's usually one of the first things you look at when you're looking at a CMS is, how are things sort of structured? Because there's lots of different ways to do that. And I'd like to explain how that works in our system. Because I think we have a very forward-thinking architecture, which is part of our differentiator. So the first thing is that Agility is a true cloud CMS. So that means that we are a software as a service platform and a multi-tenant application. So that means that each and every instance, like the Sandbox instance that you got, you guys are logging into manager CA, which is managercanada.agilitycms.com. So that's our multi-tenant application for our Canadian data center. And the beauty of this sort of architecture is that when we make updates to our CMS, all of your customers and you guys, the ones building the websites, get those updates automatically. So there's no versioning. Some of the other CMSs out there, you sort of get one version, you either install it yourself on some server and maintain it, or maybe they host it elsewhere as well in the cloud, but it's still versioned, and you still have to, at some point take manual action to be able to update that to a new version. So a benefit with us is that you can, once you're on our platform, you can evolve with us. And this platform's been around for some time now. I know we have someone from Cineplex here. Cineplex has been a long-time customer of Agility, and it's kind of a good story. You guys have actually rebuilt your website several times over the years, but actually kept the same backend in Agility. So you just sort of keep changing up the front end. But that content structure is still in the cloud. And we were doing this way before headless was even a concept, was even a word. which is kind of funny. We were sort of always been a headless CMS. But that's some of the benefits of that. You're sort of decoupling your content from your presentation layer, which makes it really easy to just redo the front end or get an app that connects to the Agility content, all that fun stuff. But we also have sort of, it's kind of like a hybrid approach, and we're actually sort of thinking of changing the wording on this a little bit. But Agility's, by architecture, is a headless CMS. However, we do have a ASP.NET SDK, which does a ton of stuff for you. And I'll get into that a little bit later, but the main idea is that you can use Agility with a .NET website using this SDK that communicates with the content server automatically for you. Or you can use Agility as a pure headless CMS with no client SDK and just access the content yourself and manage caching and all that kind of thing. So we have REST APIs that you can just hit. So if you wanted to, you could build a 100% client React app, for example, and be able to use the REST API to deal with the content as you like. Same thing goes for building a mobile app. We have several customers that have apps using iOS and Android that are just calling the REST APIs to get stuff. But if you're building a .NET website, I highly recommend using the SDK we have, because it's going to save you a ton of time, and it's tried and true and running on a lot of major websites and some of the top brands in North America right now. So I was going to explain a little bit about the architecture here, but and normally our VP of product, Joel Vardy, normally does this little spiel, but I wanted to bring in a little remote version of him. I'm just going to play the first few moments of this video because I think it really does sort of capture the essence of why Agility is architected the way that it is. So I'm just going to play this video shortly, just the first few minutes of it.
Hi, I'm Joel Vardy here at Agility, and I want to take you for a bit of a deep dive into the Agility architecture today. Now, pretty famously, when folks start on their first day at Agility, or when the first time I talk to someone who's going to be developing at Agility, usually I go up to a whiteboard and we draw some circles and some lines to show how things like content sync works, to show where the content lives in the cloud, and things like that. But what I thought I'd do is put this video together to take a look at how that happens in a little bit easier to digest way, so the folks can take a look at how the Agility architecture works, how it's unique, and how it can work for you. Let's take a look. In a traditional web app or website architecture, you normally have a database and the actual website code itself. This means your website needs to be updated by a developer, which isn't optimal. And you're reliant on a database, which tends to be a single point of failure in many scenarios. Now, in a traditional CMS architecture, which evolved out of the need to update your website more often, you often have an administration app and an SDK, or a software developer kit. This means your website content can be updated by everyone, and developers can still change the design somewhat, but they're often limited by the available templates. And there's still this database involved. And if that goes down, your website crashes. Now, Agility CMS works a little differently. Content editors work with the Content Manager application that's designed to make their job easy. Your content is synchronized to the website using a content server. And developers can build whatever they want with that data. It's unlimited creative freedom using something called the Agility.Web assembly. Now, Agility is also multi-tenanted, so everyone gets the latest version all the time with no downtime. There's no updates, there's no upgrades that you have to worry about. It's all just handled for you. And your data in those content DBs lives in its own separate repository in the cloud. And your synchronized content is stored on your website servers as content files. Now, those web servers can live anywhere. It could be in your hosting environment, a public hosting environment, but we really recommend the Azure cloud, which we can take care of you when you're in there. And that means no matter what happens, your website's going to stay online.
So I'm going to pause it there.
What about the process?
Great question. So the best way that I find, I'd like to get rid of this more video thing popping up here, but there we go. So the way this works, think headless, right? Most of you guys kind of understand what a headless CMS means, right? You just sort of have APIs that you call. But as a developer, there's a problem with that just out of the box. And that is, you have to write this application that queries all this data. Then you need to handle caching. So you need to know when someone updates something in the cloud or when that API, your cache gets refreshed. So that's normally something that developers have to code themselves in their application. Yes, there might be some templates or maybe some GitHub repositories where people are sharing code and ways to interact with that content. But what we've done is we've sort of provided something out of the box that does all that stuff for you in a really smart way. So another problem too is when you're building a website that depends on some sort of external resource, if the Agility API were to go down for whatever reason, your whole website would go down. You wouldn't be able to access any content unless you had taken the time to build some sort of caching system on the website to make copies of that content. So what we've done is we've set up content DBs, and we have this whole system in our Azure cloud. We have the content manager where you log in to modify content and save content. We have the content server, which is responsible for providing APIs to be able to integrate with that data. And then we have this offline processing. So what we do is whenever you publish or content in the CMS, we actually send a message to your web server to say, hey, this content's been published. Think of it as like a webhook, right? And at that point, your website actually says, oh, I have new content, great. It makes a request back to our content server and gets a copy of that content. And that content is stored in the file system. So now your web server has all the content it needs. And when I say content, think like just basic content in a JSON format, something that you might see in an API request, gets saved directly in the file system. The beauty of that is that all of your code, when you're writing code in Agility, you don't really have to worry about calling APIs. There's actually just a content access repository class that, as long as you make calls through there, all that does behind the scenes is accesses those files you have in your file system and provides the data for you. It also handles a lot of putting things in cache and memory and everything. So you always have your content in memory available for action within your website. This means that out of the box, you build a solution with Agility, you don't have to worry about caching, performance, all that kind of stuff. All those things sort of come out of the box in a turnkey solution. Otherwise, if you go with the REST API, you kind of have to handle a lot of that logic yourself, if you do it all. And the beauty of this as well is that at any given point in time, you can actually deactivate your syncing web server, or let's say Agility, for whatever reason, blows up and you're not available to query it. Your website is going to stay up entirely because you have a copy of all that content already. Before I move on there, are there any questions around that sort of general architecture? Because this is a key thing to understand with how Agility works. Everything else will sort of fall into play as we go in throughout this workshop. But any questions there about how that works?
Is it directly taking the data from content files only? And who is working with the content server and propagating it? Yeah, so there is an endpoint as part of the Agility.Web SDK that's installed in your .NET site. That's the sort of endpoint that communicates directly with the content server. And all of that communication is handled automatically for you. As long as you register your syncing web server in Agility, we know what endpoint to call. And then the code, which is in Agility.Web, which is the DLL that you can get through NuGet, handles all of the logic of syncing content and everything. So all you need to do as a developer is register a syncing web server, install the Agility.Web SDK somewhere, deploy it somewhere. And that hosting environment can be anywhere in the world. As long as it's accessible from our content server, you're golden. So that could be in Azure, it could be in AWS, it could be on-premise, it could be in your closet, as long as you have some sort of way to tunnel through to that. And where is the file located?
The files are located wherever you'd like. So there's in the web config, there's a place where you can specify where in the file system you want all these files to live. Yeah.
Can we change that file? No. We can change it.
Change the content files? You could. I probably wouldn't recommend it, because if you're changing the content files there and Agility resyncs the content, it's going to get overwritten. So yeah, you wouldn't really want to change the content files. Charlie?
Yeah, just for the folks, yeah, they're all online.
Yep.
If you want to ask a question,
oh yeah, yeah. Just to repeat the question, he was asking, where do the content files live? The content files live wherever you want them to be. You just specify where in the file system you want them to be stored. and the communication. Well, yeah, I'll repeat questions afterwards. I think you guys got the point there. And when it comes to multi-server environments, which I mean are like pretty much all websites now are hosted on more than one server, there's many different ways to be able to synchronize content. So we can synchronize to each individual server if they're addressed individually. That's one way of doing it. Another way to do it is we sync to one single endpoint, and then you take that endpoint and robocopy that to however many servers you need to go to, so that each server has the file system. Or the best option, the recommended option, is actually to use services in Azure like Azure App Service. So another one in AWS you can use as well. But Azure App Service in particular handles this really, really well because you have one syncing endpoint, and Azure App Service actually has a shared file system between all of its servers. So if you scale up to 10 servers, you just have to sync to one endpoint, and all those 10 servers grab the content from the same location. So it's really good architecture out of the box. So that's our recommendation. Go with Azure App Service, and if you have to, then do like a custom server setup, but I highly recommend that these days. But you know, sometimes you don't have a choice.
Who's fetching that file? Like, which service is fetching that?
So you're just asking which service is fetching that file. So you're saying, are you talking about the content files? The content files are in there. In your code, which you'll see when we do the workshop today, I'll show you examples of that. It's pretty much just a data access class where you access content, and behind the scenes, it gets it from the file system and returns it to you. So it's completely transparent to the developer. It just kind of works like magic. All right, any other questions around this? You'll see more of it too as we go through this workshop. And
quick question, Jamie.
Yeah, go ahead, Russ.
One of the things I was struggling to refresh my memory on when you were talking about the offline sync was how the schema sync works. It's one of the things I was doing today was republishing a module definition. And if you could just sort of describe that process.
Yeah, so I was talking about content gets synchronized, so do schemas. So if you have a schema of content in the cloud, because you can customize your own schemas, your own field types, your own content types, etc. Those things actually get synchronized down as well, just like regular content does. And so a module definition, Russ, to your point, you can actually modify in Agility and publish the module definition. So you can edit a definition, keep it in like a staging mode, and then publish that. And when you publish it, that goes to your live server. So if you're making a change and you don't publish it, that gives you a chance to be able to test schemas locally or in a separate stage or UAT environment before you actually publish that live. Yeah, there's a common sort of gotcha with module definitions right now where if you change a definition and you try to publish a page that uses that and it hasn't been defined, it'll actually stop that sync from happening until you mark it as safe. There's actually a few things we want to do to improve that flow, but that's how that works right now. Any other questions? Okay, cool. So let's move on now. So let's talk about how web content management works within Agility.
So we didn't finish the video.
Sorry? Yeah, no, that's fine. The rest of the video talks about some other things that we're just not going to cover in this course. You can totally watch the rest of that video on your own time. Yeah, it talks about some of our other offerings, like we have e-commerce and user-generated content, a few other things. Good stuff to know, but just in the essence of time, we'll move on and get to some real coding. So, web content management is the way that you work with your content within Agility. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to build a bespoke schema in the cloud. So what that means is you're not getting something like WordPress that has sort of schemas for all these content types already. You're going to get something that is essentially blank, and you get to customize each and every single piece of content that goes in there, like a typical headless CMS offering. And what you guys have access to today, the Sandbox, is just literally me coming up with stuff to put in there, right? That's just me configuring things. So when you get in there, you look around, don't think, oh, this is all that Agility is. No, that's just all that I put in at that time when I built that developer Sandbox. You can put in any types of content you'd like, any different types of schema types you'd like. And the whole purpose of this is, this is a market that targets mid-market to enterprise customers. people that need a high level, high degree of customization, and they want a CMS that is built to be tailor-made for them, not the other way around. So you define the pages, you define page templates, you define the modules, you define the content. It's all up to you as the developer and the architect. And then ultimately, you're going to be outputting code on your website using your front-end framework of choice. Whoops. So I'll take a moment here just to go over pages a little bit and web content management. So we're in Agility here. What you see at the top is mostly like what you guys will see as well in your own sandbox. This is our main dashboard where you can see a few things. Most of the stuff is empty right now because this is a brand new instance. If you click on pages on the left-hand side here, this is your sort of main navigation tree. So pages is something you'd be working with, and editors would be working with a lot when it comes to web content management. You have a concept of, home. Well, these are all pages that I've created, but you can nest pages like this, create all different types of folder structures. It's a website tree. So it looks like what it is on the website. So for example, if we look at this live website here, you can see down here, this actually shows us the domains that are connected to this instance right now. So I just hit view and went to live. You can also preview it too, but we'll talk about that afterwards. Hey, Tunch, do you have access to that test drive subscription in Azure? Can you scale up the server? Test drive sponsorship. So this is the front end of this website, and this is our homepage. And you'll see here that the page path here, if I click around on these pages, is /products, /customer gallery, all of the page paths you see here in the browser bar correspond to page paths you see directly in here. So whatever page you create in here, the page path is what it's going to be in the browser. Same thing with the nested pages, etc. And each page, when you click on the page in Agility, you're going to see the stuff that's essentially on that page. So a page is made up of a content zone, and I'll dive into this stuff in a bit more detail shortly, but the idea is this is where you go to manage all the content for that specific page, and you can add different types of things to that page and sort of stack things on top. When I refer to modules, modules are like the individual pieces of the stuff that encapsulate functionality on your website. So if we're looking at my home page here, you'll see that this is sort of broken down into two sections. There's this sort of like banner at the top, and then there's this listing of 3 items down here. And that corresponds to 2 modules you see here. There's the Jumbotron, which is that sort of top banner thing, and then there's like a list of featured content beneath.
So module is part of the content.
Sorry?
Module is part of the content.
Essentially, yeah. When we open up a module here like this Jumbotron, you'll see that this has fields, and those fields are the sort of schema that we've defined in this developer website. So you say, okay, Jaguar Computers is the title. The summary is this. It's an HTML area. We have a learn more URL and a learn more label, and those get outputted directly on the website as you like. So you sort of mix in that content with the HTML as you like, and so each module is sort of encapsulated in its own functionality. Yep. Sorry, yeah. So that's pages, and we'll talk about this in more detail as we go on today, but I'll just give you an overview of the CMS. We've got pages there. We've also got the concept of shared content. Shared content is a place where you put things that aren't specific to a page. So for
What about nested page?
Nested pages?
Yeah.
So you were saying, what about nested pages?
Yeah, so what is the content? So why do you create a nested page?
Yeah, so you can nest as many pages as you'd like. The way you would do that is, for example, if we want to nest a page under Contact Us, I can create a brand new page here, and I can say, my new page. And so now we have an empty area where I can add a new item here. And let's just add a rich text area. The old hello world. And now I can save that. I can also preview what that's going to look like. So I can actually hit preview on this page. Allow pop-ups. Again, there we go. So what's going to happen now when you preview an update as we're doing this, it's going to open up a new tab, and it's going to launch a preview version of that page, of that homepage that we were looking at. And it's going to show us what content I just added before I go ahead and publish that. So this is a page that I've just created. I added a rich text area there. It's going to be a really boring looking page when it loads here. And you will notice that when you're previewing stuff, it is a little bit slower because it actually pulls down content automatically. So it doesn't look in the file system because the file system only knows about published content. It actually pulls this stuff down as you need to. So that's our little sample, hello world. And you asked about how to nest a page. So there I just went to a page in Agility, I added a new page, pizza bread underneath. And if we're looking at the page path here, you can see it says contact us / my new page. And in here we have contact us and then my new page is immediately beneath that.
If there are multiple pages contact us, so how do you know? It's like different pages inside like // like that.
Yeah, you can. There's no limit to how many pages you can nest. I mean, obviously within reason. I wouldn't recommend like having like 10 or 12 nest levels deep because it might be hard for editors to really find where things are. There is a search bar which will search across all nested pages, which does help in those scenarios. But yeah, I wouldn't go crazy with over nesting stuff too much. It also makes the URLs a lot longer and stuff too. So moving on to shared content now. Shared content is a place where, think of these as like your database as a service kind of thing. This is stuff that you create in the cloud that isn't specific to a page. So a great example of this is like a list of products, right? You might reuse that, like you want to be able to access products from multiple pages across the site, right? You might have a page that features products on the homepage. You might have a product listing somewhere else. You can't just enter copies of that content on each page. That's kind of not very good for content architecture. So instead, what you end up doing is you define a list of what is a product, and you create a list of those in shared content, which is now accessible to everything, REST APIs and pages. And you can access that shared content from any code within your website. So it's very easy to be able to query the list of products, get a list of them, do stuff with them, show you kind of what this looks like. I can click on products here, and this is going to give me a listing of all the products that we have in the system. So, for example, I can open up this item here, and we've got, this is a published product that we have. It has a title, it has a category. We have some tabs here for general, images, price, summary. These are all customizable fields. So these are all fields that we've defined in the CMS. And we also have the ability, you have the ability to group together fields. So like, a product might have like 100 fields, who knows, right? But sometimes people have a lot of different fields for things. Rather than have one giant form with everything stacked one after another, you can actually use tabs here to be able to sort of group together those things. And this whole form, input form, is generated based off your schema. So we'll get into that a little bit later too, and I'll show you how to do that. But just to reiterate, this is entirely customizable without writing any code most of the time. So then we have media and documents. Media and documents is where all your media is. These include things like images, PDFs. You might have some static HTML in there or static HTML templates that you can sort of import into the rich text editor, or videos, things like that. The best way to think about this is if it's not code and you need it on your website, it probably belongs to. Otherwise, your code belongs in your website build that gets deployed. But yeah, even your fab icon could be in here and referenced directly in here. All of these media are served over CDN. So that means that anything you upload here gets globally distributed to all of the data centers across the world. And then that way, if you have a large file, someone is trying to access it from Brazil, they're getting it from the closest geographic location to them, as opposed to going all the way back to Canada or the US, wherever your website is. And the CDN URLs, so you have full control over what those want those to be. Out of the box, you'll notice here that these are all using an Agility domain. So you'll see this one here, cdn-ca.agilityscms.com. However, in a real scenario where you have this actually working on a real website, you can change this to be a custom domain. So it can be like media.mywebsite or whatever. And this is all included within the Agility CMS offering. You have a license to Agility, you have access to meeting documents, and you've got this repository for all of your media. And that's pretty much it when it comes to web content management. So there's sort of three major components: pages, shared content, and media and documents. And primarily, that's what we're going to be looking at today. There are a few other things here that you can see in this list, things like user content, website users. That's a little bit outside of the context of our workshop today. But just so you know what those are, these are components that we have that allow you to manage content coming in from the website. So if you have a list of profiles, website users you want to be able to log into your website, those are managed through website users. If you have any form submissions that you want to collect that data for and be able to sort of moderate that data or just store it somewhere for easy export, that's what user content is for. So you're able to store content that's created by users on your website itself. So whereas web content management is stuff that you're creating and publishing to the world, user content and website users is stuff that people on your website are actually inputting into you and you're collecting the data. That all belongs there. Oh, I have one more thing too. I guess I'll show you guys settings. So under settings, you'll see here that this is where you guys will be spending a lot of time as developers. This is where you go to be able to customize your schemas, set things like global scripts that are supposed to be in the site, like, input like a Google Analytics script or some marketing script that needs to be in there. It's also a place where you can create and edit page templates, where you can view web logs for your server. This is actually a really cool feature of our system is that you can click web logs here, and this will automatically pull the web logs from your deployed server, wherever that is, and display it within the window here. So if you have any issues you're seeing in production or in preview, you're not sure what's going on, you don't have to log in the server and figure out what's going on. They'll be right here. Okay, so just to recap here, what's in a page? A page consists of a page template. When you create a page in Agility, it has to have a template. And that template consists of something called content zones. So content zones are places where editors can add functionality to the page. So in a basic site like this one we're looking at here, we just have one content zone where editors can just add modules stacked on top of each other one after another. But there's other examples where you might want to have a more complicated page template. With all the crazy about this parallax scrolling and all this stuff these days, sometimes you can get into scenarios where you might have very many different content zones that represent full screen slides and all that crazy stuff. You can all do that within Agility, it just depends on how you architect it. And each content zone can have one or many modules. So a page template has to have at least one content zone, and each content zone can have one or many modules. So if we look at this sample here, we'll just move these guys out of the way. This example here, this is like a page that we have in our sandbox right here. So you'll see that like the inner content here is the page template. And this specific, again, this is just this specific example. You can sort of customize the way that you want this to work in your website. But typically this is good practice where you have the header, which is sort of outside of the page template, part of the master page. You've got the page template here, and then you've got a content zone on the left, which includes all of the content there. And then there's another content zone on the right. So this is an example of a two-column template. You've got stuff on the left with stuff on the right. And then, you know, this whole thing is one rich text area, which would be module within the content zone. And then this here is another module within that other content zone. And if we had more modules, they would show up stacked side by side. Not side by side, one over the top of each other. Are there any questions before I move on in terms of, you know, how a page is sort of structured within Agility?
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm just wondering, is it possible to create like a dynamic content zone? Like, are you able to have a content zone that you could then add like a module to that splits it up further, like a 50-50 column sort of thing? Or
yes. So what you can do is in your code, what you do is in a content zone, like let's say, well, let's look at content zone A in this case, right? You could have modules that automatically determine, hey, if I'm in this content zone A, and I'm side by side between this other thing, then add some CSS classes that makes that split up. Because in Agility, we don't force your presentation layer, right? So it's entirely up to you as a developer how you want to do that. So you can add code in your own website that determines, hey, I have these modules in this content zone, how should I display them? So if you make that rule as a developer and say, okay, well, if they add a bunch of these modules, I want to make sure that I automatically space them out properly and I put them in the right columns. Did that sort of answer your question, Andrew?
Yep.
Cool.
So you mean so we can do something on module where you get dynamic comments?
Yeah, within a module, you can determine what content zone it's in code, and then you can change the CSS accordingly to accommodate for that. Yeah. Definitely one of the more challenging page templates, but totally possible. So I'll explain a little bit how .NET MVC works with Agility. And just so you guys know, we're talking, like this whole example that we're looking at today is using the .NET framework, but we do have a .NET Core implementation that we're actually currently just finishing up right now. Tunch has been very hard at work at that lately. And that's going to be actually released. We have a version of it released already, but we'll be having a further workshop on that next month. So, but all the concepts are generally the same. So if you're curious about .NET Core, it's good to know. We have always followed an MVC pattern in Agility because we find it works really well, especially with how the pages are structured. So when you open up your project, you're going to see a standard MVC solution. There's nothing too crazy about it. There's no weird web form stuff. It's just vanilla MVC pretty much. You're going to have an Agility.Web NuGet package, which is that SDK I was talking about earlier. So that's going to be installed as a NuGet package, which also adds an SVC endpoint for syncing content. There's routing that just works out of the box. Now you can customize your routing. It's entirely up to you. But out of the box, if you add a page in Agility, and then you go to the page path on your website, it's going to automatically load that page. It just works out of the box. But you can further extend and customize the routing as you need to. The cool thing about our architecture is that it's actually really easy to add Agility to an existing .NET MVC project. So if you have a customer that, doesn't want to rebuild their entire site, or they have, some legacy stuff that they want to keep in place, and they just want to take sort of baby steps into, migrating to a CMS, it's actually really simple to be able to sort of install Agility on an existing MVC site, and then you can actually set it up so that it only powers certain parts of your website. It doesn't have to power everything. You can just really have a lot of finite control over that. So, Agility.Web is kind of a black box a little bit in the way that all the stuff that it does behind the scenes, but we've added enough hooks and the way that you sort of use that to be able to really, so you guys still have control over sort of when that kicks in, when it does stuff, when it doesn't need to. So a page template, which is sort of what we looked at there in terms of the image, that outputs with a razor partial view. The module output, so like that Jumbotron or that featured content that we showed on the homepage, actually has a corresponding code that gets executed with it. So that is either a controller action result or that's another partial view itself. Don't worry about this too much. We're going to get into this in our demo. Agility also provides auto-generated C# API classes representing a content and module definitions. That is a big word full of stuff, but essentially all that means is when you define your schema in the cloud, you click a button and you get a strongly typed class file representing all of your objects that you can easily integrate into your MVC project so that you, at all times, know your property names. You can get compilers when someone screws something up. So very handy tool. Agility.Web, I'll talk a little bit more about this and then we're going to move on. It's the core assembly of the Agility SDK. There is a dependency on MVC. This handles syncing for you. It's available on NuGet. Does a lot of other stuff too. Page routing, page templates, module execution, content access and deserialization between the content repository, which is on the file system. URL redirections handles it for you. And also out of the box includes output caching. So a page is output cached and that number is configurable and it handles busting the output cache when you publish something. All that stuff is handled for you. Handles preview mode, development mode, live mode, language context management, channel management, and much, much more. But we won't talk about that anymore. So the general page render lifecycle when you're executing a page in Agility is an incoming request comes in for like an About Us page, right? Then in the route config of your MVC project, if you're familiar with MVC, route config is where you've registered all your routes. In the route config, there's actually a wildcard route that is in there, and you determine what order that wildcard gets in there. If you're building a brand new site just in Agility, likely there's just going to be one thing in there, and it's going to be a wildcard site map. So any incoming page matches that Agility tries to handle. It finds that Agility.Web then says, oh, you're rendering this page. I have the content for this page. I know a page template to execute. So it'll actually go execute your page template razor view, and then we'll literally loop through each content zone and execute each module one after another, and then returns the entire thing in your render body method in your layout file. So sometimes that's helpful to understand what Agility.Web is doing behind the scenes, but generally that's what it's doing. Are there any questions about this page render lifecycle? All right, cool.
So Agility have to work with MVC.
Agility right now, yeah, is well. If you're using it in this manner with the SDK and syncing, which we highly recommend, yeah, it needs to be an MVC website. But it supports any MVC, including .NET Core, which is going to be released very shortly. But to the point I was making earlier, there's also REST APIs available that you can use with any system. All right, so enough talk. Let's get into actually looking at some code and how all this stuff gets put together. So let's take like a quick 5-minute bio break. If you guys need to get a glass of water, use the bathroom. Let's say it's 2:55 right now. So let's take 5 minutes and resume at 3 o'clock. So we're going to go through running this sandbox locally in Visual Studio. So what you're going to want to do is you should have gotten get an email now? I forgot. On that page where you signed up for a sandbox, there should be a link to download the source code. So if you haven't done that, do that already. Or to do that again, sorry. And if you have trouble going back to that page, let me know. I can find it for you. So, you know, for me, this is the page that you guys want to be at to be able to download the source code. So what you're going to do is you're just going to hit download button here, download the source code. And again, if you guys have any trouble getting to this page or can't download the source code, let me know. So I'll leave you guys a few moments now to do that.
So the root filter is called S. The root folder is called S.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know why it's called that, but it's, yeah, it's it is what it is. So you want to extract that zip file. So to get to that link, you had signed up on here before, right? Just hit test right here again. It'll actually should be there again. Yeah, still, yeah, there it is. Yeah. So once you've unzipped it, if you open it up in there, there is a solution file. Just look for it. It is in there. I believe it's in the MVC something rather directory. Yeah, so the folder just called S. And then in there's a folder called MVC4 sample site. Open that guy up. And there's a solution file there. So you should be able to just open up the solution file using Visual Studio.
You're planning to install the MVC4.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't have time to update this to MVC5. So yeah, if it's going to ask you to install MVC4, go ahead and install that. Shouldn't take too long. I'll give you guys a few minutes for that. Yeah, but I assure you this is compatible with MVC5. I just haven't updated the Sandbox yet. How are you guys doing? Did you able to get the source code? So once you've got it opened, you're going to just want to hit debug. Start with debugging or without debugging, doesn't really matter. I'm going to do without debugging. It should automatically restore any of the missing NuGet packages and just start up for you. Yeah, the only thing is if you don't have MVC4 installed, it's going to ask you to install it. So take a moment and do that now. Also scale up. I don't know if it's actually not
check test code. It's all of your content.
All right, so if it was successful, you guys should be running this locally. And at the top there, you should see a called the development bar. That'll say viewing development mode. This is just letting you know that you're running this locally. Is anyone having any trouble getting to this step?
When you compile it, right?
Sorry?
Compile.
Yeah, when you hit start with or without debugging, it'll automatically compile and restore your NuGet packages. Yeah. You guys get that going? We'll wait a couple more moments.
Is this page? It will show up when you run it.
Yeah, when you run it, this is the home page. Yeah, so that's what should show. Ooh, no. Don't close that. All right, while you guys are getting that going, I'm just going to talk a little bit here. It will load over IIS Express, localhost with a random port. So now that we understand some sort of basic concepts of how Agility works, like we have the site running locally right now, we understand a little bit about how pages work, how you can create content schemas in the cloud, how those work locally, how the sync works. Now what we're going to do is we're going to actually go through, we're going to build a blog. So a blog has several components, right? You can have a list of blog posts. You're going to have some way to display those blog posts in the list and the details page of those blog posts on your website. So we'll go through the various ways to set that up now. And again, if you guys are stuck or have any questions, please don't hesitate to put your hand up and let me know. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to create a new page template. This is going to be the page template that all of our blog stuff is going to use. Because right now our main website just has a single one-column template, which isn't necessarily what we want in this case. So we're going to create a new page template definition called blog template with a single content zone. So we're just going to create a page template that's very similar to the one we already have, but it's going to be specific for our blog stuff. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go into Agility here. We're going to add code for page output in our Visual Studio as well. So we're going to initialize the page template in the cloud. We're going to add code directly in our Visual Studio project. And then we're going to create a page using that, and then we're going to actually verify the results. So that's what we're going to go through right now. So first things first, we're going to create a page template with a single main content zone. So to do that, we're going to flip back into Agility here. And you're going to go to the settings section. And you're going to select page templates. So this will list off the page templates that are already in the system. There's already a couple in here. There's a 1 column and a 2 column. There's also one with a shared sidebar. We want to create a brand new one just for our blog. So you're going to click the plus sign in the top left corner there. And this is going to open up the dialog for the page template details. So under name, we'll call this blog template. Of course, you can name it whatever you want, but for the sake of keeping things consistent, let's call it blog template. And then under digital channel type, this is a concept in Agility where you have different channels. Here, we're really just talking about websites, but it's important to know that there are other channels where you can publish content too, but we're not going to get into that right now. So we're going to select website. And then when we select website here, it gives us an output type. So the output type is what's going to tell our application what code gets executed when this template is used on a page. So we have 2 options here. We have a relative URL. We also have an inline code. Inline code is a way to actually create and code all your stuff within the browser, which is kind of cool and pretty good to use if you need to do something really quick and dirty and don't have access to the source code. But in most cases, you'll end up using the relative URL, which corresponds to a file deployed in your source control, just for best practices. So here, we're going to put in our relative URL, we're going to put a relative path to a place where we're going to have our templates. And if you look in Visual Studio, you'll actually see here under Views, under Templates, I should get this thing out of the way. Hold on a second. Yeah. Let's put you right there. Under Views and Templates, you'll see we already have a couple, right? We have that 1 column and 2 column. Those are the ones that are already defined in Agility. So we're going to add a new one. So what you're going to do here is we want to set a relative path. So it's going to be ~views/templates/ whatever we want to call it. So we'll flip back to the content manager here. So we're going to call this views, templates, and we're going to call this blog template.cshtml. That's the Razor file extension. So once you do that, it's also going to ask you for module zones. Now, a template really should have module zones. If you don't have any module zone, then editors can't add anything to the page, which probably isn't what you want to do. So you're going to add a module zone here. In this case, we're just going to create a single one, and we're going to call it main content zone. So under display name here, call it main content zone. And we also have the ability to add default modules. We're not going to do that in this case, but this can be useful if you have a template that you know editors are going to reuse over and over and over again. What you can do is you can sort of scaffold in these default modules that are going to be automatically added to that page. So when someone creates a page, select a page template, you can configure that template to sort of have all these modules already in place, and they just need to go click the module, enter the content, save, publish the page, and they're good to go. In this case, we're going to leave it empty because we just want to be really flexible. So editors need to add modules for something to show up.
What's the shared module zone?
Good question. Shared module zone is the ability to have multiple pages have the same modules in the same content zone. So think sidebar on a website. Let's say all pages are going to have the same sidebar. As opposed to editors managing the sidebar content on each and every individual page, depending on how many pages you have, that could be a really unruly task to do. You could take advantage of shared content zones. So what that means is if you add a module on any page to that shared content zone, that module gets added to all the other pages that use that same page template. So it allows you to have an architecture where one thing, they can control content in one place, and that propagates to all the other pages that use that same page template. In the Sandbox, there's an example of page that actually does that already. It's called the 2-column template with shared sidebar. So we've got main content zone, and that's all we need at this point. We'll just hit save and close. So that's going to save and close the blog template for us and initialize that in the cloud. The next thing we want to do is we want to create that corresponding Razor template file in our Visual Studio code base. So we'll go back into Visual Studio here. Under templates, we're going to create a brand new Razor file. So we'll go to add, view, and we'll call this blog template.cshtml. Make sure you spell the same thing that you put in the content manager, otherwise it'll get an error. I make that mistake sometimes. And you're going to want to create this as a partial view.
Do you need to specify the file name?
Sorry?
The file extension?
In the page template window, I don't know what I just did. I don't think so. I think it automatically puts it in there. Let's see. Yeah, it automatically adds it, so you don't need to worry about it. So what you should have now is an empty. Oh, I actually did put the extension in here and screwed it up. So yeah, don't put the extension in that window. Oh, gotcha there. All right, so now you've got this open window, and now we're gonna put some code in there. I'm not gonna just write the code right now because I have a copy of it here. So I'm going to go. Just so you know, these are all step-by-step instructions for everything we just did. So if you need to review, you can go back to these slides afterwards. But I'm just gonna skip through them here, essentially to where we need to be. Where's the code? Okay, page template, result definition. There we go. There's the code. That's what I was looking for. So
we have to copy from there, right?
yeah, I'd recommend either go to that slide and copy the code from there and just paste it directly into that window, or you can take some time to type it in. But nobody really wants to do that right now, especially on a Friday afternoon. So copy that code you got there. Yep. There is, yeah. There's a copy button there.
Yeah, it does.
If you don't know the Control-C, oh, you can just hover over it and hit copy. I see. Instead of selecting, yes.
So we copy them. So we write everything right over there, or
yeah, it's gonna be empty file. Just paste it in here, just to make it quick. So this is the result that you're gonna want. Yeah, that's what I was saying. It's good to have the slides open because otherwise, yeah, you wouldn't be able to copy paste this. So here's an example here where we're just putting in some just base CSS just to get this thing look right. We're gonna have a little more of a contained template. Our main template is quite wide. We want the blog one to be a little bit more skinny and in the middle. So we're setting a max width of 730 and centering it, which is a little bit smaller than the other one. And then you've got this code here, which I'll highlight what this is doing. This HTML that rendered content zone, this is a method that's part of the Agility.Web SDK. So what this is going to do is it looks at the reference name main content zone, and it's going to render that during the page render lifecycle, which essentially within that method, it's going to loop through all the modules within that content zone and execute each one by one. And then put that content directly in place of this placeholder. Okay. Yeah. So once you've created that, you can just save the file. Can't remember if you need to build the project or not. Let's just build it anyways. I think if you add a new file, you do need to. So I'm going to build the project. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go back into Agility here and we're going to test out our template. Yeah. So again, to reiterate, we've created the template in the cloud. We pointed it to a file in a relative file in our local project. We've added the code there. Now the next step here is to create a page that's based on that page template. So under home here, I'm going to create a brand new page here. And use the blog template, the one we just created, and call this thing blog.
Is under the root folder?
Yeah. So yeah, when you're creating a brand new page here, you can just click on the top here and just hit new, and that's going to create that page in the root folder.
Like template.
So now that you've got that there, you're going to hit save, which is going to create a new page for you, just called blog. And now what we want to do to be able to test out our page templates, we just need to add some content here. So I'm going to click new item here. And I'm just going to add a sample rich text area. Because we just want to test outputting some module here and make sure that our template is working. So add a rich text area there and just type in whatever you want. Do a little hello world sample.
Which one is located? You added? Or which?
Yeah. So under that content zone for main content, you hit the plus sign to add a new module. Select any one of the modules in there, but rich text area is probably the quickest one. Add that and then hit save and close. So that's going to actually initialize that module on the page. So now what you should see is something that looks like this, where you've got a page called blog or whatever you may have called it, with the main content zone using the blog template with some sort of module on there that can output something. So once you've got that in place, you know, it could be tempting to hit this preview button. We can do that. And actually, I'll show you what happens if we do that. We're now going to try to preview this page. Now, the thing is we're previewing this on the server, right? On the deployment server. Now, the server doesn't have that page template file we just created.
Yes.
So you're going to get this error. And that's expected because we haven't deployed the code we just did yet. I haven't even tested it locally, really, is the bigger problem. So what you can do is on your local machine, so on your local host, I should say, if you actually just refresh the page, if you already have a tab open, you'll actually see the menu automatically update, or at least you should.
Yeah.
You'll be able to see the page that you just created. Yeah, you'll be able to see it within the navigation. That's because there's code in the website that automatically just, you know, looks at the sitemap and automatically adds that in the header. Well, mine is a little bit more slower.
May I ask a question about publish?
Yeah.
Okay. So publish, like for example, we have the staging. We have so what do we do? We'll first save it. We go to staging and we do publish. Go to
yeah. When you create a brand new item and you save it the first time, it immediately goes into a staging mode. Mm-hmm. And content that is in a staging mode essentially means that content has been created, but there's a pending change. And if it's never been published before, then it won't even exist on the website. But if a previous version may be published, so it'll actually tell you that within Agility here. I can show you that in a moment.
But my question is like, after we're published to the production,
yeah,
I want to bring back the staging, but I don't see you have the process yet. We do save, publish.
Yeah. So what you
know, yeah. So I cannot do unpublish. Like,
you want to revert the change essentially.
Yeah, but actually, what I have to do, I unpublish. You know, and then I do save. It will go to staging.
Yeah. So if you had published something and you want it to be removed from production entirely, so as a production never knew anything about it, you would unpublish it. There's been an unpublished button, and that will put it into an unpublished state. Then that also means that in your local environment, you won't even see it either. Because unpublished essentially means I don't want it to show anywhere.
Yes.
Yeah. And then
I have to save it.
Yeah, then you save it and then initialize it into staging again. So now you can preview it, but it won't be on live.
Okay.
Then you can publish it, then it'll be on live and in your local environment and preview. Yeah. Good question. So if you want to change the page information, if you click on, you see these tabs here? If you click on the SEO tab, you're going to see there 3 fields: title, page name, and menu text. If you want to change the page path, as in like what would be typed in when you put in the URL in a tab, you would change the page name property.
So what's the meaning ISO?
Sorry?
SEO.
SEO?
Yeah.
It's just search engine optimization. So this is a tab where you're configuring properties that might influence SEO, which includes things like your page title, the path where it's going to be, meta description, keywords, additional header markup, etc. While we're on the topic of pages, actually, there's also additional things here too. Where settings. So settings allows you to, if you want to, change the template. So let's say if we decide we don't want to use this template, we want to use something else, we could do that. Or scripts allow you to sort of put, one-off scripts on this page that are going to be meant to be executed. This is like JavaScript. You wouldn't put core logic in here. That belongs in your website code, but there's always going to be cases where marketing is like, hey, we need a tracking pixel on this page, and you don't want to do a code deployment just for that. So that's what this is really for. So locally, you should be able to navigate directly to that page you created as it is displayed in the header. And if everything all worked out, you should see, a little bit of text or from whatever module that you placed here, loading the page path of the page you created. And we know this is using our page template because it's contained a little bit smaller than the other one that we had. Are there any questions from anyone, any of the remote participants?
So can't we create a controller now?
Sorry?
Template is okay. Template is good, but controller side.
Sorry, could you repeat your question?
I'm just asking for the controller. So if you create a controller, you get a corresponding view. This is somewhat template. If I have to use another view, like that.
Oh yeah, you can do that for sure. It's the same as any other Razor template. So you can nest whatever you want. You can call a controller within there that's going to output other custom HTML, sub partial views, whatever you want to do. Yeah, you can do that. Yeah, we don't really force any sort of way of doing things. You have your template there. If it works in Razor, it'll work in there.
I've got actually a question.
Yes, perfect.
You've mentioned in settings I can change the template. So yes. If the template I select does have different zones, what's going to happen with my modules?
Yeah, so good question. So if I were to change this blog template, so I hit change, and I select my one column template, I could just hit apply new template here, but that means I'm going to lose my module that I add to this page. So what I can do here is I can just drag that across. And decide where those modules from this page go on the page template that I want to modify.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome. So yeah, everyone should be at this point now. So I'm going to continue. So the next thing we want to do is, now that we have a page template, what do you think the next step is going to be here? We have a page template. And the goal here is we're going to want to create some sort of listing of blog posts, right? Probably, or the details of a blog post, something like that. So how do you think we would do that? How do you think we would accomplish that next? What do you think the next step is going to be?
For my son, I need to create a module.
Yeah. I guess I should have asked that question before I put the slide saying lab create a module. But yes, that is the right answer. So yeah, to break it down, what we're going to do here, I'm going to do this a bit in stage here just to show you kind of different ways to do this. We want to be able to create a module that's going to output the details of a blog post. So we're going to create what's called a blog post details module. So it's going to display the details of our blog post. So we're going to do a couple different things here. Well, number one, we're going to create a new module definition. Number two, we are going to download that schema that we just uploaded from the cloud and have that as strong type object within our project. This is really cool because we'll be able to reference those properties using strong type objects in C#. Then we're going to add code for our module output. And then the last thing is we'll add that module to a page, likely the page we just created, and verify the output. So first things first, we're going to go into the content manager and we're going to go to module definitions. And we're going to create a really basic module that just has really like 2 fields. Title. Yeah, it's going to look like, let me just refresh my memory here. Yeah, we're going to have 3 basic fields: title, details, and image. So I'm going to go through that process right now, and you can follow along. So I'm in Agility. I'm going to go to Settings. And then on the left-hand side here, under Customization/Development, there's an item here called Module Definitions. You're going to click to open that up. And we're going to create a brand new module definition here. So we're going to click the plus with the new button in the top left corner. And here we're going to give the title of our module. So we're going to call this blog post details. And the description property here is really important when it comes to modules. Because editors, when they want to add something to a page, like modules to a page to do something, because the content manager doesn't know what your module is actually going to look like, it's not like you can show them a screenshot of, hey, this is what it's going to look like, because this is entirely decoupled. Your website can display things however it wants. But it's important to really give a meaningful description. That way editors, when they're adding something to a page, they know exactly what this module is going to do. So in this description, I'll say this will output the details of a blog post. Something like that would be sufficient. Next, under Form Builder, this is where we define the fields that we're going to capture in this input form, and the same fields that we're going to use to output that data on the website. So for fields here, we're just going to hit the plus sign here, and which is going to launch on their flyout, and we're going to give this a title property. And you'll see here when we click title, it knows that that's a text field, so it automatically, you can only select text for title. That's the only type of property that is essentially auto selects your format for you. So we're going to hit required because we do want the title of a blog post to be required. We don't want that to be optional. And you can optionally put a description on fields as well. So you can say, this is the title of a blog post. And that could be helpful for the editor when they're inputting content. You'll be able to see that there's some help text there. So we'll hit save and new to be able to add that property and then add another one. So now that we've got the title, what else do you think we need for a blog post? We need something that's going to hold the main content of the blog post, which is going to be like a rich text area. Something that's like a WYSIWYG interface for the editor to be able to use with. So we'll add a details field. And under field type here, we want a WYSIWYG area, which is essentially an HTML area. We could use a long text field, I suppose, but the editor would not be able to use HTML in there, or they really have to know their HTML to be able to put that in the long text field. So HTML is the field that we want for this case. But you can see here there's lots of other different types of field types. There's date time, number decimal, true, false, which is like a checkbox, drop-down list, image gallery, attachment list, link content, YouTube video. We'll talk about link content in a little bit more detail later, but this is pretty much all the different field types you're going to need. And depending on the field type, this automatically renders a special type of input control for that within the form. So for this, we will set that to HTML, and we'll hit save and new. The other thing we want to add to is like an image, right? Because blog posts usually have some sort of image. Normally, it's good to display those in some sort of listing view. So for the field label here, we'll just call this image. And under the field type, you could put text as well, I suppose. That way but you'd be assuming that the editor would know a full URL to the image that they want to use. Usually that's not the case. So you can just select image. And again, you can mark it as required, but we'll just leave it as optional. There's also additional things here that you can set, like file size, height, width restrictions, valid field type restrictions, or file type restrictions. Those are handy if you know that something has to have a transparent background. Maybe you're going to only force PNGs, or you don't want the editor to upload something that's like 5 megabytes, and you want to put a max limit on the file size. You can put that in there as well. So now we've got image in there. We can hit save and close. So now we've got our properties: title, details, and image. So we're almost done here, but not quite. The last thing we want to do here, you can skip this form customization. We're not doing any of that. Output template. The output template is the code that will be executed when this module is rendered on the page. So this corresponds to a partial view or a controller action result. And you could do, you could use either one. I usually recommend using controller action results, especially if you have any sort of business logic that you need to do in there, and you want to get that logic out of the view. That's just best practice for developers. But if you have a really simple module that literally just outputs the text that people put in, well, then maybe partial view is just fine. You don't need to overcomplicate it, right? And makes it a little bit quicker to develop. So in this particular example, we're going to use a controller action. So we're going to call that, we're going to select MVC controller, and you just have to type in blog. You don't have to type in blog controller, because otherwise it'll look for controller, which you don't want. So just type in the first part of that, and you're going to type in an action result name. So our action result here is going to be blog details module. Yeah, what did I name that? Blog post details. Thank you, Tim. Well, it really doesn't matter. We can name it whatever we want, but yeah, just for consistency, I don't confuse myself later. Blog post details is the action result, and you can hit save and close at this point to save the entire module with all those fields. So what's happening right now as I save and close this is this schema is saved in the database, which is in Azure, and at this point, this module I just created, because it's a brand new one, this schema actually gets synced automatically to your production server. If it was an existing module that I modified, it would not automatically sync, but syncs anyways. So now that we've got this blog post details initialized, the next thing here is we've got to create the corresponding code for it again. It's very similar to the page template. Define it in the cloud, put the code in. So now we're going to go into Agility here. And we want to refresh the C# classes. This is important to be able to use the strongly type objects, and we get compile time error checking. So there are two ways to do this. You can actually download the file directly from Agility, or you can use an extension that we have in Visual Studio. I'll demo both. So the file that I'm talking about, though, is within your website project under models. So in this particular case, it's right here, but it could be anywhere in your project in reality. And you'll see here, this is an auto-generated file that has all of your content schema that you've configured in the cloud. And it's all in place right here. You'll never have to manually modify this file. This is completely auto-generated. So don't mess around with it, because it'll just be overridden the next time you make an update. So one of the ways you can do this is you can go in the content manager here. You can go to oh yeah, you're going to take the download API button you see right here. So that's going to download the file for you. So it just downloads just like a regular file. You can open that up. It's a .cs file. And you'll see here that the name is generated based off of your Sandbox name. Now that's not the file that we have in our project, so we can't just do a straight copy paste. Also, our Agility content manager doesn't know your namespace of your project either, so the namespace isn't quite right either. So what you have to do manually here is just to copy everything below the namespace. So if you just hit shift control down, no. There's yeah, page down. Shift page down. I don't have page down on my
end. We'll take you to the end.
Oh, there you go. So take it to the end, but not quite to the end. So we're just copying the inside piece here. Then you can go back into your project here and essentially do the same thing and just replace all that stuff. Now, as you can see here, this could be a little tedious, especially if you're making changes all the time. That whole thing took us all about 20 seconds or so. or a little bit more. So yes, you can do it this way, and right out of the box, this is sort of how it works. But the cool thing is you can also do something else. It requires a Visual Studio extension, which you can download. But I'll show you how that works. So I have this already installed, and I can just right-click my file here. Thought I had it installed. Maybe I don't have it installed.
That's good.
Okay, well, I guess I'm going to go ahead and install it now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Extensions and Updates. And I'd recommend you guys do this too. It'll also save you some time through this project. But you don't have to. And if you just search Agility, Agility CMS, there it is. The Agility CMS extension. Oh, that's weird. It says I already have it installed. Okay, well, for those of you that don't have it installed, you shouldn't have a problem. I'm not sure why I am. But if you go there and type in Agility CMS extension, you can install that. And
if you go to the installed list, it was just disabled. It's still installed though.
Oh, look at that. Someone's paying attention. Thank you. Wait, where did you see that was? Oh, under installed. Yeah. Oh yeah, enable. But yeah, you'll see once you have this set up, that's a lot easier. I'll show you in a moment. Visual Studio. There we go. All right, back at it. Okay. Now I should be able to right-click this file. And under the context menu here, you'll see Agility CMS. You just want to hit Update Model. Now this is going to ask you to log in, because it does require authentication. And you can just log in using your Agility credentials. For in the namespace. So once you have that extension installed, sir, I'll do it once more here. Just showing that that's working. It's good. You're going to right-click, and if the extension is installed, you'll have Agility CMS in the context menu. You might need if you install it, you might need to restart Visual Studio to get that initialized.
One question, so
Yep.
already say you already say all the files, right? So the open solution. So I think there's some file there that connect this one thing.
So this is a Visual Studio extension. So it actually gets installed into Visual Studio itself and runs in its own sort of runtime environment. It's actually not associated to the website, but all it really does is just goes, grabs a file, and then replaces it in place within Visual Studio here.
But how does it know like where to go to? Like,
It's magic.
It's that whole thing, and it knows the website name.
Oh,
From the
okay.
website name and security key in your web.config, it's using that. And then with the credentials that you're putting in there, it basically logs into the content manager and puts that button for you and closes it down. And it corrects the namespace that you have, that you would have.
Yeah, so you can see with this flow, it's much simpler to update. You can literally just, it's 2 seconds, you just hit update, it updates. I've already logged in here, so I don't have to type it in again. Just confirm OK, boom. And then it automatically updates that file for you. So much easier to keep that in sync. You don't have to flip back and forth, copy with all that stuff in place. So it's a bit more of a streamlined experience. So I recommend using that wherever possible. It will save you some time, especially in the early going when you're making a lot of changes to content fields and realize you have to add more fields or delete other ones or change the names or all that kind of stuff. It's much faster. Okay, so now that we've added that, the next thing we need to do is we need to add the controller for that blog we just created. So we're going to go to controllers here, and I'm going to add a new item, add controller. And we're going to call this the blog controller so that it corresponds with the controller name that we put. So you'll see that the item we created is blog-controller.cs. And the next part here is we need to create an action result that corresponds to what we put into that module field. So we're going to put in public action results blog post details. Sorry? The other thing you can do too is if you actually flip back to the slides here, and you're down in this section, 12.8. Let's go down here. Going. Yeah, you can actually just copy this code that you see in here. So if you go to the slide 12.13, you can actually just copy that code directly and flip that back in your code here and just replace it.
Is it a parcel view? Parcel view, right?
Sorry?
This one is a parcel view?
So yeah, this is a control action result. So Agility.Web, when it renders this module, will hit this. And then really all this is doing right now is just, returning a partial view. So it's not doing much work right now. Literally, it's just passing it directly to a partial view, and that's it. But you'll see in the next lab, we're going to extend this a little bit more. So once you've got that in place, the next thing we need to do is we need to add the code for that partial view. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So under views, I'm going to add a new folder here called blog. And under there, I'm going to create a new item called blog post details. And I'm going to create as a partial view. And then
How do you create that model_blog?
How did I create this?
No, the class that is coming, like model_blog.
Oh, great question. Yeah, I didn't really fully explain that. So, let's refresh. Let me go back to. Oh, I have two open here. Yeah, so let's look at the blog controller here. Yeah, so good question. He asked where does this class come from? Yeah, so that file that we downloaded, whether we did it manually or using that Visual Studio extension, brings that in for us. So if I actually hit F12 on that definition, you'll see there it links directly to the partial class that was auto-generated for us. So the beauty of this architecture, and especially in this SDK, is that there's no data access to look up here. That's not on you guys to do. Agility.Web automatically will go look up the content in the content files, pass that as a parameter to your controller action result. So you as the developer, all you need to worry about is what format is my data in right now? Do I need to do anything else to it? And then return it as a partial view.
So there are many, so inside that, model_blog post it is. So all are like two private fields are there, and many private fields are there, one public.
Yeah, there's don't worry about the private fields. There's really just several public ones. There's the details, there's the title, and there's the image, and that's all we really care about, right? The rest is some internal stuff. Don't worry about that. All right, so now that we've got, next you want to create your partial view. And I'm going to just do the shortcut here and copy the code directly from the slide. So if you go back down to 12.1.15, you'll find the code there. And just go ahead and copy that. Now we can go directly in a partial view and just paste that in there. And you'll see here that our view model is set to that, again, that class that was auto-generated for us. And so in the partial view here, you're able to reference all of those properties and get compile time error checking all out of the box. You'll also notice that the images here that we have, we're actually appending a query string. $W = 730. This is an example of how our CDN works and how you can auto-generate thumbnails. We call it ad hoc thumbnailing. So the idea is if you make a request to an image and you append those query strings, you can actually automatically thumbnail that image to whatever size or spec you need. You don't have to pre-generate them beforehand. It just does it automatically, and it gets cached. So that makes it really simple for you to be able to create a property in Agility, allow the editor to upload whatever size they need, but then on the website when you're displaying it, just automatically thumbnail to the size you need. That way it's easy for the editor. They can just upload it whatever size that they have, as long as it's like at least 730 pixels. And then you can auto thumbnail it down when you're actually displaying that on the website side.
How does it do that again?
So I'll give you an example actually. When I load up this module, I'll give you an example. So the next step here is now that we've added the code for this module, which is essentially just executing this partial view, it's really simple, right? Where if it has an image, display the image tag, display the title as is, and then display the raw HTML of the details. So now the last thing we need to do here is actually just add that to a page. So if we go in pages here, and we go to our blog page, and we're going to remove that other module we had there before. We don't need it anymore. Add another one. Now we can select our blog post details that we just created. And this is going to have our input form for us. So my first blog post. Let's make that a little bit nicer. And now I can upload an image from my local file, or I can browse my existing Medium documents and select that. So if I browse here, I'll be able to select anything from my existing assets. Let's just use the logo. Actually, let's do something a bit bigger, actually, this one. So we're adding an image here. Now I can just hit save and close. Now, on our page here, we will need to recompile the project because we did modify a controller. So we do need to rebuild the project. So that'll compile. Once that's done, in a moment, we'll now be able to just refresh that blog page and we'll see that module show up there. Perfect. So now if I hit F5, you actually see that. Yes, start without debugging. Always remember that. That's right, yeah, I had closed Visual Studio when to re-enable that extension. You guys might need to do the same thing.
I missed your steps.
I can help you with that.
For me, 2 menus and
I missed something.
Oh, 2 menus.
yeah. I don't know why.
I think I know why that's happening. Your module. Can I see your page template up?
I go to title edit, details and everything, and select an image. Anything is first block.
Actually, in here, scroll up.
Can I just copy that for the content?
Content is whatever you want.
Let me see your go to templates here. Okay.
And then you can browse for upload, but in this case, we will be browsing for the images that we have already on it, and select the bigger one, then 7. And then you can
Actually, what I did is, I didn't create a parcel. So I just created a view and
go back
inside the console. I created a view.
Oh, don't return a view, return a partial view.
Have you added
That's
the
that's why. Yeah. If you're seeing the site rendering the site itself again, make sure your controller action result is returning a partial view, not a view. So what should happen when this actually works, you should be able to refresh your page, and you should see something that looks somewhat like this. Obviously, it depends what image you used. But I also had a question here about how our thumbnailing works. So you had a question on how the thumbnailing works, right?
Yeah.
So this image, this native size image, is 750 by 500.
There is a W.
So I'm just loading up the native image now. Oh, it's slow. So this is the native size image here, 750 by 500, right? So when you append a query string here, so let's say we want the width to be 300 pixels. You just do that. So I just added question mark W equals 300. Our CDN is automatically going to make a new thumbnail of this that's available with that path and cache it. So now that image, even though the text is still showing 750 by 500, this is now 300 pixels rendering us. The CDN's doing that. Yeah, like it's our custom CDN. So yeah, we are the Agility platform is doing that for you. But the website itself plays absolutely no part in this. It's entirely decoupled. So your website isn't thumbnailing things. It's all happening in a multi-tenant application that we control. But there's a lot of cool things you can do with this. You can play on the width, height, the type of cropping. You can set like a background color.
You can fill crop.
Yeah, what else?
Resize, change the quality.
Yeah. Oh, quality is a good one too. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, it actually creates a physical file of the new image, so that like CDN serves it from the file app, so it doesn't have to be processed again.
Yeah. So the first time you thumbnail something, there might be a slight delay, but after that, it's there forever. They do eventually get cleaned up after some time if they don't get accessed in like months. But yeah, that all handles in our system. So yeah, at this point, you should have created your first Agility module. And then to reiterate, the steps we went through is we defined schema in the cloud, we set the fields, we told the module what code to execute, and then that actually works through our system and gets synchronized, and Agility.Web uses that during the page lifecycle to be able to get the data, pass it as a parameter to your module, and then you guys as a developer control exactly what you want to do with that, how you want to output that. So that's how the backend works. And I know we have some front-end developers here that are joining us today too. The good news is there's not really much you guys need to know about Agility so much, because at this point you still have a partial view, you have full control over the HTML, the CSS, so it really doesn't get in your way at all. Any questions about how modules work? Either the guys here, guys and gals here, or any of the guys and gals that are remote? Cool. All right, I will assume that that all makes sense. So,
I have a question.
Yes, Tunch, go ahead.
I know the answer.
Oh yeah, that's a good question. So shoot.
Do you think this is a good architecture for a blog post details page? Like every time you have to create a new page.
Yeah. So Tunch asked a good question. He says, "Do you think this is good architecture?" Because he was saying every time you need to create a blog post, you have to create a static page for it and do all this, every single time for an editor. That is. In my opinion, no, it's not good architecture, and we'll actually go through and we're going to fix this. Actually, that's the next thing we're going to do. It's like my next slide that you just ruined. Yeah, we're going to fix that. So there's a much better way to do this with blog posts, but I wanted to show you guys how to create a module, and I think this is a pretty good way to be able to show some. Well, yeah, sure. But yeah, at the end of the day, module is a module, right? So we've done that, and you should end up with something like this, where you see module output that looks something like that. So yeah, the content architecture challenge, do you think it's good, scalable, how can it be improved? You just ruined it all, Tunch. Okay. So yeah, let me ask you guys, what do you think could be improved? What would you do next? How would you architect this?
Something like reusable part that is.
Sir?
I don't know.
Okay. Any other takers?
Create content, shared content.
Ah, there you go. Yeah, you got it. Yeah.
That's reusable means shared content.
Yeah, so we need to have some sort of central place to store all of these blog posts. And then really all this module should do is just read from that data, right? So that's what we're going to do now. So we're going to implement what's called a dynamic page, because every blog is roughly going to have the same layout, right? They're all going to be pretty consistent, and which is kind of a good thing too, because it becomes a lot easier to maintain, a lot easier to make feature updates, all that kind of thing, because you control all the page layout from one central place. So what we're going to do here is we're going to use the concept of dynamic pages. So instead of creating static pages for each of our blog posts, we're going to create what's called a dynamic page, which is a node within the page tree that's sort of a placeholder for how blog articles are dynamically going to be routed to. So what we're going to do, we're going to create a new content definition called a blog post. The content definition is very much like a module definition, but it doesn't go on a page. It just goes in shared content. It also doesn't have any corresponding code to execute. It's just data. We're going to create a new blog post dynamic list based off of that definition in shared content. We're going to create a new dynamic page in pages. And then we're going to fix up our blog post details module, which has some redundant fields. So then we're going to update our blog post details module we're going to update the code to get context of the dynamic item, and you'll see how that works shortly. So I'm going to speed things up a little bit here, just because how we're doing on time. So if you guys feel like you're getting behind, that's okay. Don't worry about it. It might be better just to watch. Again, this whole thing is going to be recorded, and you can follow through these steps on your own time as well. So what we're going to do is create the blog post definition first. And trying to remember what the definition is supposed to look like. Oh yeah, with the same properties. All right, so we have all those properties that are already in that module definition. Now we just want to essentially take those out and put them in a content definition. So to do that, we're going to go into settings here. We're going to go to content definitions. We're going to add a new item. And we're going to call this blog post. And under form builder here, we're going to add the fields for that. So it's going to be the exact same ones that we had in our module. So we'll call it title, details, and image. So you should here, just to recap, you should have a title with a text field, details with an HTML field, and image with an image field.
And required is required.
Yeah, required is probably a good idea. Yeah, I didn't do that this time, so I will do that now. And then you'll see here under the tabs, it's like very similar to a module def, but there's one notable tab missing here, and that's the output template. There's no output template for this. There's no code. It's just content. That's it. So we'll hit save and close. We don't need to do anything else here. So we've now defined that blog post definition. Next, what we're going to want to do is we're going to initialize a list based off that definition. Think of that as like initializing a table in a SQL database. It's kind of similar to that. It's not a table in a SQL database, but it's the best analogy I can think of.
What is the use of that form customization and all?
Yeah, some of those other properties in that definition allow you to do some more advanced things that really typically, like 99.9% of the time, you will never use, but they're there if you absolutely need to. That allows you to add in your own custom code within the input form and all that stuff. And a lot of that there is actually mainly there for some legacy support. We have some new ways of doing that now that's actually a lot better. Not going to be covered in this session, but if you are curious about extending or customizing input forms, come talk to me, and I'll point you in the right direction. So now that we've got our definition set up, we want to create a new dynamic page list. We already have one in this website called products. We want to create another one. So I'm going to create a new one here. Under content definition, click dynamic page list at the top here, not a regular one. This is a dynamic page list. Under here, we're going to select blog post. And we're going to just call this blog posts, plural, because it's a list of items. It's not just a single blog post, it's a list of them. So now we have an empty list. To give you guys an idea of how dynamic pages actually work, let's actually look a bit closer at how products work. So within Agility here, within the website, you'll see that there's a products page. And this products page just lists products. Each one of these products is an item within a dynamic page list. So on this page here, we just have a module that's just looping through all those items in that list and outputting them in a listing. Pretty straightforward. Now each one of these has its own details page. So if I hit view details, you'll notice here that the URL path starts with /products, and then it has essentially just a friendly version of the title, which I'll highlight there, a friendly version of the title that's converted into the URL. So this all uses dynamic pages, and we'll take a look at the code when we implemented that for blogs, but this is generally what we're trying to accomplish here is same things we've done with products, we want to do with blog posts. So it'll be like blog / title of the blog post. So we've got an empty one here. Let's add a couple items. So I'm just going to hit new item here. Call this post 1, and I'm just going to copy some random lorem ipsum in here to fill some content. I'm going to select an image. Let's do this one. I am now going to hit save and new to save that item and create a brand new one. Call this post 2. Again, I'm just going to paste some random stuff in here. browse another image. Let's do something like that. So now we've got two posts initialized here. I can hit save and close. So now I've got the 2 items. And with those 2 items being created now, I can now configure the dynamic page for that in Agility. So this is before we even read any code. I'm just configuring the CMS to work this way. So in our page tree, under our blog page that we already have blog, or maybe whatever you had named your previous page, I'm going to create a brand new page here. And instead of putting it as a regular page, I'm going to select dynamic page. And I'm going to use the blog template again, because we want to use the same template. And I want to build the pages from a specific list, the list I just created. I want to build the pages from our blog post list. Then there's a property here for sitemap label. Sitemap label is, what do you want the name of this dynamic page to be within the page tree in Agility? This is really just for internal purposes, really. So it's usually good practice to call it something like, post details, something like that. This doesn't allow spaces, so if you put a space, it just adds a hyphen character. So we'll just call that post details because that's our dynamic page. Page path formula. This is probably the most important part about dynamic pages, is that Agility.Web, that SDK, will automatically do the routing for you for these dynamic items. But it needs to know, what path should I be looking for? Like what path expression should I be looking for to match these items together? So to do that, you select one of the fields. And we only have one compatible field, because we have an HTML field that can't be used for URL path. You also can't use an image for URL path, so you're going to use the title field. It's the only one that's available based on our definition right now. So when I select that, it's just essentially saying, hey, this is the formula we're going to look for. So what we're instructing Agility is saying, hey, I'm creating this dynamic page underneath the blog. So if there's any incoming request that matches blog / friendly version of the post, this dynamic page will get executed. And I'll show you that in code and how that works, so it all sort of comes together. So what we want here is we're going to keep all this stuff at title, so we're good. Hit save. That's going to create that dynamic page. And you'll see here that the icon for this page represents a list. It's because, again, to show that it's a dynamic page, it's not like a regular static page. It's a little special. The other thing you'll notice, too, is that right at the top it says this page is built from the blog's post list, in case you forgot. Now, the next thing we're going to want to do here is we're going to want to place our blog post details module, the same one that we already created that was on the blog page. We're going to move it to this page because we want to change the way that module works, but keep some of the code. So we're going to add that module here. Now it's asking me for these properties. These fields I'm going to end up deleting, but I'm just going to enter something in there just so I can save the module first. So now we have this blog post details module on there. The next thing we're going to want to do, and I'll just refer to some of my notes here. Yeah, let's clean up our blog post details module a little bit. So we'll go to settings, we'll go to module definitions. We're going to go to blog post details. And under form builder here, let's just clear these properties out. We don't need them. The reason being is because all of our properties and our fields that we want to collect are actually on the blog post itself. It's not in the module. In fact, the module is really just being used as a placeholder to execute code. It's not actually really doing anything in this case. So I'm going to leave those empty and just hit save and close. You'll notice here this is giving us a bit of a warning. It's because we had a previous module that was published and we just made a big change to it. It's letting us know that, hey, this module isn't available for production environments yet until you mark it to be safe. I'm just going to dismiss that for now. So, got our blog post details, and we've updated that. The next thing we want to do is we want to update some of the code that's within there. And this is the code that we're going to want to add. What this code does is it's going to, essentially the line that's most important here is the blog post equals agility context dot get dynamic page item of type blog post. And that essentially is just retrieving the dynamic item from memory that is already in the SDK, because Agility.Web will know the page path already. It'll know what item you're trying to load, and you're just trying to get access to that dynamic item.
So what is the problem with the page template now? When we go to post it in page template, it is giving red mark.
It is what, sir?
Yeah. So this is coming right now, the page template.
Oh, you can just open that up. It just means that the module is there, but you haven't you haven't set any value in there. So just hit save and close on that.
So
yeah, and that'll resolve that issue. So I'm going to copy this code here, and I'm going to go back into my blog controller, and I'm just going to update my code in place here. Now you'll see this is going to give us a squiggly line error saying, hey, I don't know what blog post is. That's because we just created that definition, right? So our website doesn't know about it yet. So now we need to update the schema again. We need to update our C# classes that our project knows about. Again, if you have that extension, which I highly recommend installing, we can just right click, hit Agility CMS, update model, click a couple boxes, hit yes, project is refreshed. Now if I go back here, you'll see that it now knows about my blog post, and I'm good. I can use that. So really all we're doing here is we're modifying the code so that instead of it just looking at the properties on that page itself, it's grabbing those properties from that blog post directly within our controller and passing that to our partial view. And then there's one last thing we're going to need to do here, and that is actually to update our blog post details here. Because you'll see here our existing view that we had, even though our property names are the same, the view model is still pointing to module_blog post details. So you can just actually update that to blog post with the IntelliSense, and those squiggly lines will go away. Well, sometimes you have to close it and open up again. Now they're gone. So we've got that in place now. And now what we want to do is we want to just double check, and we can test our module now. So I know I just did a lot of different things there, but trust me, it'll all sort of make sense when I show you this now. So in code, I'm now going to go to my blog page, which actually in this case now should just show, this will actually give me an error, I think, if I didn't remove that module. Yeah, good. Oh, I had to build, sorry. Build your project, that always helps. On get main blog page, we can get rid of this now, we don't need that. Leave that as is. Got this in place now. Now, what I can do is if you go to this page path, blog, and I remember I called one of my posts in the title, post 1, right? Now if I type in the URL post-1 like this, it should actually show me the details of that specific blog post. There we go. So a couple of things I want to point out here, right? The Agility.Web SDK automatically figured out lots of things. It saw this incoming request for blog/post-1. So it knows, hey, there's a dynamic page note here. So it looks at post-1 and says, hey, is there any item in that list that matches that formula where the title equals post-1? It found one. It put that into memory for me automatically. And then in my code here, for that blog details, which is now on that dynamic page node, all I'm doing is just getting access to that item. It's not even a lookup. I'm just saying, hey, get me the dynamic item that's currently already been figured out. And so I have that blog post. If I don't have a blog post in context, then I know that this is a 404. Didn't match an item in the list, I can throw a 404. Otherwise, I pass that to my view, and I have all of the properties that were associated to my blog post available to use in my partial view. In this case, I'm just outputting the image and title and details. So similarly, if I were to go to post-2, I'm going to get the details of my other one. So what we did there is we just quickly implemented a dynamic page that's connected to this list, and now every single, if I create a single post, it'll just work automatically. Now there is one major piece that we're missing to this puzzle right now, which is the listing view. We need somewhere to be able to list all of our blog posts. So we're going to do that in our next step. Before I continue on here, are there any questions generally about dynamic pages and why you might want to use a dynamic page versus just having static pages? Any questions around that?
Could you just give a quick review what you did for the dynamic?
Sure. Yeah. So someone just asked to do another quick review of dynamic pages. So what dynamic pages are is a way to dynamically route content. So as opposed to having an individual static page for all of your blog posts, you could do that, right? The problem with that is when you have static pages for all of your blog posts, you don't really have any control over where an editor creates a blog post. So you might think about how you might implement a listing view. How do you know what is a blog post, right? So you need to be able to have a content definition, a central place of blog posts. So you need to have a list somewhere. Then it makes a lot of sense to do a dynamic page because all of your execution logic is now in one central place that handles all of your execution for all of your blog posts. So as a developer, it becomes really easy to maintain how blog posts work because you have one place where all the code comes in for all of your blog posts, and you can control the layout, what that appears like, and everything much easier. Now, you could implement a very similar way of doing things without using dynamic pages at all, but these are tools that are available for you to use, and we would recommend using them. Alternatively, what you could do is you could build your own custom MVC route and do all that lookup stuff on your own and render your own stuff. You could do that too, but I mean, why reinvent the wheel if you don't have to? Did that sort of answer your question? Okay.
Does the formula have some connection with title as
Yes, it does. Yeah. So that's actually one thing that I missed there. When I created that title property, there is a checkbox that you can check off to say mark this unique, and then it'll make sure that no other item can have that same thing. And really, in a more production scenario, I wouldn't even recommend using title as the page path formula because titles can change a lot, and editors need to realize that hey, if they change the title, the link is going to bust, right? It's anything that has that, so that could be a major problem. Now, your code could be smart enough to automatically adjust those links, but Google's not. It's not going to know where the page was moved to. So normally what you end up doing is you'd have like a separate field that's called like URL slug. And then, then they have full control over what is in that field. And then you'd use that as your sort of property for the dynamic page resolution. Cool. So, verify module, but we did that. Let's just take a quick five-minute break, and we'll resume in about 5 minutes or so. And then after that, what we're going to do is we're going to quickly do a listing module, and then sort of finish off with doing a deployment, which should be quick and easy, and then just talk about some of the burning questions, and then pretty much done for the day. I'm going to sort of round this out by creating a module on our listing page, because right now we don't have a listing page. We have a blog page, and then we have a dynamic page, but we have no way of like listing the URLs for those. So yeah, we're going to head and do that now. So what's the first thing we need to do to create a module? What's the first step? Any takers? Not those guys over there.
Pick me.
Okay, well, I'll give you a hint. It's in the content manager. Come on, guys, you're not making me look very good, right? Sorry? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so yeah, we're gonna create that module that definition first. So yeah, we'll go to settings. We'll go to module definitions, and we're gonna create a brand new module and just call it blog listing. So we'll click new item, and under title here, we'll just put blog listing. And under description here, we're going to list, I want to say list blog links. Seems like a pretty good name. Simple. Next, we need some field values. Let's see what, I have code here that I'm going to copy, so let me just double check what I had here before. Right. Yeah, okay. So we're going to create two fields here. We're going to give it a title field, because our listing will probably have a title. Most listings have some sort of title where it just says like blog posts. So we're going to add a title field. And it's going to be text again. Let's just mark it as required. Now we're going to create what's called a link content field. A link content field is a way to reference other content. So we're in a module and we want to reference our blog post list because that's the one we want to iterate over. So we're going to be looping through that list of blog posts and outputting the details of each one and the link. So under field label here, let's just call this blog post. And under field type, let's scroll down here and I'm going to select linked content. Under linked content, now it's going to say, okay, what definition do you want to link to? We want to link to blog post. And now it's going to ask me content view. Content views are a way of explaining lists or items. An item or list is a content view. So we're going to select shared content here because we want to point this link content to our list of blog posts, which is living in shared content. Under shared content, we're going to select blog post. And then finally, as our render type, we're going to just put a link because really we just want to have a link, like a shortcut to blog posts being rendered within the content manager. That makes it easier for editors to open up that module. They can click there and it takes you back to the blog posts. The other option is that we can render it as like a selectable field. But in this case, we're not going to do that. We just want to iterate over all blog posts, but we could set that up to render as like a search list box so that people can search for blog posts. An editor can search for blog posts within the input form and then maybe only list the ones that they've selected. So they could highlight blog posts, for example. Or you could have a drop-down list that makes them choose one blog post. For this example, we're just going to use just a standard link. Go ahead, save and close here. I've got that link content of blog posts. And now under output template, we're going to select MVC controller action. We're going to use our existing blog controller we've created. There's no need to create a new one. So it's called blog. And then action, we'll call this, what do I call this? Blog listing. And I'll hit save and close. So now I've defined that definition. Now I want to add that module back to my blog page. My blog page right now is empty. It's not doing anything. I want to add this module to that. So I'll add that up, blog listing. And let's just give it a title called My Blog Post. And you'll see here, there's a shortcut. I can hit edit content here, and it's just going to take me a shortcut to my shared content list of blog listings. But I don't need to do anything there. I'll go back out, hit save and close. So now I've initialized that, that blog listing module, and now I'm ready to add code to output my list of blog posts. So if you go in the slides here, I think I've got some code snippets in here. No, I actually did this as a partial view. That's fine. I'm going to copy this. And I'm just going to quickly do this here. And remember, I just created a new module, so I do need to refresh my properties here. So I'm going to use that quick little VS extension again to update my modules. Boom, that's done. And now I'm going to say blog listing here, module, bam. And then I'm just going to return a partial view. Call this views blog listing dot cs HTML. And now I want to create that partial view. So I'll click a brand new partial view here, call that blog listing. There's partial. I screwed that up here. Whoops. That's not how you spell CS HTML. There we go. Oh no, my insert is on. How does that even happen? Oh yeah, here we go. Now I'll go back to blog listing here, and I can paste in those details that I had from the slides. So let me. I know I just did that pretty quickly there. Just wanted to get through that a little bit. So let me explain sort of what's happening in the code here a bit, and then we'll check out what's happening in the result. So at the top there, you can see that we have some code, which is saying like this probably should be in a controller action result, but I just wanted to show you guys what this looks like all directly in a partial view, which you can set up that way if you want. I have a list of posts, so I'm saying model.blogpost items. This is an example of a way to enumerate a list, getting a list of content from Agility. This is using the our content repository behind the scenes and getting that content directly from your file system. So that's all happening behind the scenes. There's no API calls you're making, no external calls, nothing like that. And so now you have a collection of posts. And then you can iterate through them. Pretty straightforward, right? Now, this here is actually another way. Let me just get it a bit bigger. This is another way you can do the exact same type of thing if you don't have it set up as a linked content reference. This is essentially our linked content reference gave us a shortcut. We didn't have to know the reference name of the thing that we were getting. However, this way is another more verbose way to make the same call. You can say new Agility content repository of type, which is the type you want to cast that into, which is blog post. And then the reference name, blog post, and then you're enumerating it by calling .items, which is going to get you all the items. This .items call is, well, this content repository is pretty much everything you guys are going to need in terms of being able to query content. So there is .items, which is going to get you everything. And it takes a bunch of different parameters. It would be helpful if IntelliSense was working right now. All right. There we go. I'll show you that instead. So items here, these are the different things you can do. You can pass in a row filter. Row filter allows you to sort of filter out those items for you. Also, you could just enumerate entirely to a list and then just use link to be able to filter that stuff. It's up to you. Takes a sort parameter, take, skip out, all this stuff you're going to need for pagination. So if you have a list of like 10,000 items, you would probably want to filter that stuff out before. So you only get into stuff you actually need. Otherwise, you're going to be iterating over 10,000 items. Probably not. You don't want to do that in a single page view. There's other things too called like sort items, get a specific item, etc. So this is the sort of, if there's any sort of API in Agility.Web, I guess this is kind of it. But it's not really an API. Really, it's just an SDK to access stuff that's already in your file system. So we're getting our list of blog posts as we see here. Let me just make that a bit smaller. Ignore that helper here, but down here we're outputting our listing title. So it's going to be like, you know, my blog post, and then we're looping through each post in there. So for each post, we're going to get the post link, because right now we don't technically know what the link of those things are because they're based off of a dynamic formula, right? So what we're doing here is we're actually using a helper method here, which is actually going to automatically figure out what the details URL of that is. So that in that way, in Agility, if you end up changing the formula or what field gets used for these dynamic pages, your code will just automatically know that, and automatically that the link will just work. And then we're just outputting the image. So the anchor tag, the image, and the details. Pretty straightforward, right? So now let's build the site, test it out, and hopefully I didn't make any mistakes. I did make a mistake? What's my mistake?
You didn't pass the module file to the coding live.
All right. Yes, you're right.
Sorry, I didn't want
Thank you. Build again. Cool. So that's done. Now, if all goes well, I should be able to click on my blog page, that main listing page. Blog post, did I? I'm sure I called it blog post, no? Blogs, posts, oops. So, yeah, I have an error in my code here. The funny thing is that this one is just fine because this already has a reference to it automatically, because that's actually part of the content on the module. But this one, I was trying to be clever and guess what the reference name was, but it was wrong in this case. So now I can go back here. Refresh. All right, what did I do wrong this time? Blog post P. Ah, yes, my listing page is incorrect. So I had a reference here to the dynamic page in my code, which is a different thing, so it should be post details. The right way of doing this is really not have that string be hard-coded in here and rather have it something served from Agility, but this is just here for it to be quick and dirty. So now I'm going to refresh this. There you go, third time's a charm. So yeah, here's an example now where I do have a listing working now for all of my dynamic items. And you'll see here that if I hover over them, I can go to post 2, which loads that one. Go to post 1, loads the other one, and that's all set. So pretty straightforward on creating listing views. So it's helpful to have a few of those sort of that sample code that I had in there, especially the one that dynamically figures out what the page path is. You could just code that in your own code as well. But you know, if the page path formula changes in Agility, that might break in your own code. So this would be a bit of a better way of doing it. Are there any questions regarding a few things we learned there, which is, you know, creating a listing view, iterating over stuff, and accessing lists through shared content? Oh. All right, cool. So the last step we're going to do here before we get into questions is we're going to deploy this. So we went through the process of creating a very rudimentary blog. And now we want to actually deploy that live. And to reiterate here, we've just been working locally, right? Our live website right now knows nothing about these changes. So in Agility here, I'm going to click View, and just to, as a refresher here, I'm going to hit Live. so I can see my live version of my website. And just to show you that my website isn't showing a thing called blog, it doesn't know about it yet because that content is not published, nor has the code been deployed. So, oops, preview. Okay, so this is my live website. Yeah, there we go. And so what we're going to want to do is, right now we're in a scenario where we have this new section that we've just created. So the first thing we really want to do here to do this right is we want to deploy our code update first. Because right now we know that the blog page and the blog post page is not live, is not published. So our live server doesn't know about it yet. So we want to be careful about the way that we do this. We don't want to publish the page first in Agility, because if we do that, then blog will show up on the live site, but the corresponding code hasn't been deployed yet, which is going to cause an error. So we need to be a little mindful on what we're doing here. So the first thing is we'll deploy the code first, then we're going to go and publish the stuff. So to do a deployment, it's pretty straightforward. In Visual Studio here, you're actually just going to right-click and hit Publish on the project. This is an example of how you publish through Visual Studio. We also support CID tools and things too, but that's a bit beyond the scope of what we're trying to show today.
What's the meaning of publish?
Publish is going to deploy this. So we're going to deploy this code base to our production website. So that's just the name that Visual Studio uses, publish. I know it's confusing because we have a concept of publishing and they have a concept of publishing. Two different meanings, but kind of similar. So when we publish here, we could actually create a brand new app service if we really wanted to and publish directly to it. You could do that directly all in one go. But we already have one that's already there, and it's already there, and you guys have your own. So what you can do is you can hit select existing and hit import profile, because we've actually included the profile in the source code that you downloaded. So you can hit import profile. I guess we hit create profile. Yeah, there we go. And then navigate to your folder that you have. And you'll see here that there's a published settings file that should be in your root directory here. So you can select that here. This has all of your deployment credentials and things. We'll hit update. And we're just going to go ahead and deploy that update. So we'll hit publish. So this is now going to take my new code base and deploy that up. It'll take a moment. In more real scenarios, you'd probably have a CID pipeline for something like this, where after you check something in and you click a button, it would actually download your source code, build it all in the cloud, and then deploy it automatically. And I can certainly give you guys guidance when it comes to doing something like that. But for the sake of demonstration purposes, we're just deploying straight from Visual Studio right now. So that deployment went through. And I don't know why this is showing me that I'm not in preview, but let me do this here. Yeah, you can see here, this is my live site. You can see that blog is not showing up there at all because my live site doesn't know about blog at all. So if I try to go to /blog, it'll give me a 404, which is entirely expected, right? I haven't published that page yet. Even though I've deployed code, I have not published the page in Agility that can actually allow that route to be executed yet. So the last step of this process, really to put all the pieces together, is I just got to go start publishing things. But if you remember correctly, I need to publish my module definition first because I'm going to mark that as being safe. So I'm going to publish that definition. Otherwise, it won't let me do it. Go back to pages here. I'm going to go to blog, and I'm going to publish this guy. You'll see this turns blue because this is showing me this is actually synchronizing this content directly to my web server right now. It'll turn green in a moment. There we go. So now that has been successfully synchronized. I'm going to go and do the same thing for my dynamic page. And then lastly, another thing I want to do too is I need to be able to publish those blog posts that I just created. So I'm going to go into blog posts here. And I'm just going to publish all of them. Publish list. And things in the way, but you can see here that my sync status is showing me that things are currently syncing right now. Now that it's finished. So those items are now published. That's a weird bug. That shouldn't say new. These are clearly all published. Yeah, they're all published. So now I can go to my live website, which actually I had open in a new incognito window. And I'm going to refresh blog. So now blog actually is empty. Why is that? Let's take a look. Maybe I forgot something here. Go back to blog, blog listing, blog post. No, I published that definition. Oh, beauty of live coding, yeah.
What about the page template?
The page template actually syncs automatically, so there's no concern there. I'm going to guess that there's something up with my list here. Let's try that again.
Really good in selecting and publishing instead of the whole list.
Very interesting. Hold on a sec here. I don't think it's a published thing. Maybe I just let me look at my code here. Maybe I made a mistake here. Let's see here. So very strange. Okay. My post work, but my listing doesn't. Maybe I got into the beer a little too early. All right, I don't know what's going on there. Let me try adding that again. Yeah, the other thing we can look at too is, maybe this is a good example to show you guys how to troubleshoot issues like this, is you can look at the web logs. Oh no, that can't be it. That was the old error from earlier this afternoon with the blog template that I kicked off on purpose. There you go. Nope.
Works in preview, right?
Yeah, it works in preview. Anyways, I think I think you guys get the idea, but I don't know what happened with my sandbox here. Let's just try this again on preview. Let's see.
Is there a way to data cache?
Yeah, there is. I've never seen this before. Like literally ever seen this before. And I've built like 30 websites on Agility before. Yeah, there isn't a way to do this. Yeah, actually, I'll show you guys. So if you get into a weird scenario like this, again, I will say that it was weird. There is a way. So under site configuration, under caching, you can actually click this button here. What this is going to do is it's going to resync the entire website again. Let's see if that resolves it.
You really want to be really careful when you're doing this because it actually clears the whole content file before it starts syncing. So it's not a delta. It's like just delete everything. Yeah. So it's a big site with a lot of content. It's going to be down for a bit of time.
Actually, that's not true. No, what it does actually is it creates a temp folder.
Oh, yeah,
it copies everything over there, and then only when that's done, it swaps the file. So there is no downtime. It's just if it's a big site, it's going to take a long time. This is not a very big site, so it won't take very long.
I'm building about that for version. I'm working on the same thing today. That's why. Like I was deleting the content file. I'm not hitting nothing. So.
How the Agility to manage the website?
Agility website service.svc is the endpoint that is in your website.
Yeah.
Basically, that's an endpoint that Agility website accesses when you actually define it as a syncing web server. So under syncing web server.
So you'll see here, even though I'm currently clearing cache, the website remains up. So there's not going to be any problem here. So the website's all fine while you're doing this. It's really not a problem with doing it. It's just the fact that it can take a long time sometimes. So you can see here, you can manage the process, see which items have been synchronized.
So I need to add server into that.
Well, in your case, all your websites, like focusing on website. Yeah. You already have it in there. There's syncing web server. Under your settings, syncing web servers. There's steplex.com or your production server. And and you guys also have a copy going on offline process.
Yeah, robocopy.
Yeah, that's your only thing. So I mean,
So just like one web, new web, so I should add data.
yes, absolutely. It's a new.
All right, we are resynchronized again. Let's
So
see.
And to update data, right?
Yes. In the content manager, you define, you say this is a syncing of the, and your website folder has a file called the Agility website service, which is basically those.
All right, well, guys, you know what? I give up. I must have done something wrong, and I'm just not in the state of mind to be able to figure out what I did. However, if you guys are curious, I'll send you an update on what I actually did wrong later. So let's take the time now to answer some of the burning questions that I know that some of you guys had coming into this. The first thing was React. I know that was a question from Harpreet here, who unfortunately had to leave a bit earlier because one of his customer sites was going down. So he was a good developer and stopped what he was doing and went to go take a look at what was going on. So we had a React workshop last month where I gave an example on how you can build a site using Agility and Agility.Web like what we've done here, but use React and server-side rendering to be able to take advantage of a lot of the front-end greatness that React has to offer. So the way that works is using React.js.net, which is a .NET framework for handling React. It's kind of hard to explain all in one go, but it essentially everything you see in Razor, in a Razor view, like .cshtml, all for modules, you don't return .cshtml anymore. Instead, you just point it directly to a component. So I could actually show you guys quickly a scaffold and how that project looks. For those of you that are curious. We are actually working on .NET Core right now, which has much better tooling for VS Code and working with frameworks like React. So this one is not .NET Core because we didn't have that ready at the time. But it's the same sort of concept. So what you're looking at here is this is VS Code. And it's the same, based on the same sandbox. And if we look at some of the modules, so like let's look at, there's a modules controller here. And there's a Jumbotron module. That's the main banner that's on the homepage of that sandbox site that we were looking at. You'll see here that there's code here that grabs the view model from the module, just like you normally would in any Agility site. You have the properties within the module object that's passed in. Instead of returning a partial view to a CSS/HTML file, in fact, you actually just return a React action result. This is actually an extension that we built that on top of the React.js.net framework that allows you to have a component, module Jumbotron, in your React site that gets rendered. And you can control whether that gets rendered server-side or client-side, which is really cool. So, you know, if I look at my website here under www.root, you'll see that I actually have under my source directory a bunch of different components here. I have something here called module Jumbotron. And if I look at what that is, you know, here's my little React component. So this is an example project scaffold that shows you how you can essentially just forget about the CSS/HTML views for all of your modules and instead use React and optionally be able to server render and client render them, or just server render them, or just client render them, which is really cool. If you're looking for more details on how this works and how you can set that up for a project, you can find that on our GitHub repository. So if you go to GitHub Agility Inc., we have several projects on here. Also, if you go to our help site, developers.agilityscms.com or help.agilityscms.com, you'll find links to it there too. There's a sample site here called Agility React Sample Site. Within there, we've got sort of an overview of exactly how the project works, how to get started with it, and how to start building a website with it. This project was built in conjunction with a few developers that have already built fully functioning React websites using Agility. So it's not experimental. I mean, I guess it kind of is a little experimental because React and .NET in general don't play all that well together, but we do have websites in production in the wild right now using Agility and React.js.net. So it's possible. People are doing it. It works. And I would say that it drastically improves your front-end capabilities. And when you have front-end developers that are comfortable using NPM, Webpack, and React, they'll feel right at home in this type of template. So that was my little spiel on React. Some other burning questions we had here was around just like, generally how Agility works. I feel like I covered that. If you guys have any other questions regarding basics of Agility, you can ask me now or ask me after the session. In terms of how the backend works, I think that sort of covered things as well too. Is there any other questions around the backend of Agility, whether it's platform oriented or website? Any general questions around the backend? All right, cool. Architecture. We talked about that a little bit near the beginning. The concept of the sync architecture and all that stuff, and how Agility is in Azure, and your website can be anywhere it wants, and it synchronizes content to and from. So if there are any questions around there, I'm all ears.
Can you sync to like a staging server?
Yes.
So what do you do, publish?
So yeah, that's actually one thing I didn't really cover, was the concept of previewing. And so in a typical environment, you'd have more than one website to work with, right? In this example, we just have the single one production one. But yeah, you would normally have several syncing web servers for different environments. You can have as many as you'd like. But obviously you'll have one production one. You'll have probably like a UAT one. Maybe you've got something even before that, pre-prod or something, right? Depending on what you want to do. When you publish content in Agility, by default, it'll go and synchronize that with all syncing web servers. However, you can always preview any environment you want. So you can, on your UAT server or on your live server, be able to preview what something's going to look like or act after you publish content. So, for example, on our live site here, the live site that I was working with, before I deployed that code, I could have previewed that live site to be like, hey, how is this going to work if it doesn't have the code but the content is published? I can test that out, and I can test it out on any type of environment. You can also temporarily deactivate any syncing web server at any given point in time. So if you want to do something major in the CMS and you're afraid it might affect something, you can deactivate the production one. That essentially means it'll just put a hold on all content syncs until you reactivate it. But the beautiful thing about that is, like, your website still remains up in production, and you're essentially saying, hey, you can't make any changes to it now. It's deactivated. And we do have some features in the roadmap right now to be able to have more control over when things sync to different environments, to be able to sort of sync something to another environment and then maybe be able to just sort of pick and choose what service you want to sync it to. Right now, it'll sync it to everything, unless you've deactivated it. Did that sort of answer your question? Comparison on other CMSs and how we sort of stack up against other things. I'll just sort of reiterate that some of our differentiators is really that architecture and that sync architecture, where it's very unique in the industry. So it's very easy to get up and running and build high-performing websites without really knowing too much about what you're doing. So the barrier of entry to our platform is very quick. We're small, and to get an instance set up and running and going, I mean, you guys did it today when you signed up through that form. That's all it takes to spin up an instance. So it's very, very quick and easy to get going. Really our bread and butter comes down to flexibility. Whether you're using the Agility.Web SDK to do all that stuff for you, or you want to leverage the headless APIs, or a combination of both, it's there to support you. And we have a long history of customers being on our platform for a very long time, and they're able to sort of grow with our platform, because really we've always followed a headless model. It's always decoupled, so sky's the limit. There's nothing you can't do with Agility. It's just how creative you are and what you can think up in your head in terms of architecture. Deployments. So, I mean, I took you guys through a very basic deployment today, and that was just going through Visual Studio Publishing. And I alluded to, you know, some more advanced things like CI/CD pipelines. Of course, it always depends on where your site's actually hosted. For example, like I know Cineplex's server infrastructure is very different than an Azure App Service, for example. There's, you know, it's a bit more complicated. So you may be limited in what you can do in those aspects, right? So it kind of depends on where your site is hosted. When it comes to hosting options, you can host with Agility. There'll be Azure App Services, and you can just use it through us. Or you can create your own tenant, use it through that way. But generally speaking, you know, as long as your code can run on a machine, it can be deployed anywhere.
One question is, how deployment related to the DevOps? You know, in the DevOps, we have the release and deployment.
Yeah, so it kind of depends on the, like, you can use any type of DevOps. Like, I have a lot of personal experience using Azure DevOps, or it used to be called Agility. No, so it used to be called VS Online. And so with that, you can use those processes, those DevOps, to be able to deploy code updates, right? You can't really use DevOps to deploy content updates yet. The content updates you need to be able to do, you know, sort of manually, or what you can do is you can sort of take note of all the things in the content that need to be published, and you can create what's called a batch. Batch is a collection of items. So, you know, as you're developing a feature or something like that, you know that, hey, in order for this to be live, I need to create a batch for this, and then be able to publish all these things. Batch collects all those items so that you have one private batch, and you know all the things you need to do, and you just hit publish button and it publishes. We'll be releasing APIs in the future that can allow you to do that through DevOps.
Is there a way you can do like schedule publish?
Yes. Yeah. There's also that's also built into our platform is content scheduling. So anything, a batch, content, and whatever, you can schedule those to be published at a certain date. Now, if that also depends on code updates, then you need to coordinate that too. But usually most updates are content related. You know, development's only required if you're adding new features or doing bug fixes, really.